Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto becomes useless to Konoha and teleported part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Issei pulled to a halt in front of a completely ordinary hotel. He didn't know what to expect from his latest client, but this was where they were supposed to be staying, so he'd do his best. The last thing he wanted to do was screw himself over. After months of backbreaking work, he had a grand total of 0 contracts to his name. Even Asia had more contracts than him, and she'd only been a devil for like a month. What did it say about him if she was leaving him in the dust? He didn't, and couldn't, resent her luck, but her rapid progress was really hard to stomach. He really wasn't sure why he bothered putting all this effort in if he got nothing out of it. Then, he remembered, he was a man with a dream, and he had lots of time to create his first contract. That wouldn't happen if he beat himself up or moped around and cried about bad luck. No, he was going to start fresh and seize the opportunity by the tits. So he climbed off his bike, chained it up and entered the hotel, reaching his client's room in very little time. Once he did, he pounded on the door and winced once he realized what he did. He was so excited that he didn't even think about holding back, and there was the very real chance that he screwed up his first impression before he even opened his mouth. He was already at a disadvantage since he couldn't teleport inside. If he heard one more person ask what kind of devil rings a doorbell, he was going to be so freaking pissed. The door opened, and Issei couldn't keep himself from frowning. With shoulder-length black hair, smooth facial features and piercing black eyes, since his left eye was covered by a long fringe, his client was one of those pretty boys. Compared to him, Issei's ordinary brown hair and normal brown eyes were as plain as day. "So you're the one they sent me," the pretty boy said, his voice as smooth as silk. It was a good thing they never met. Ko Academy had more than enough pretty boys to steal all the girls, and not only did this guy seem like he could make girls wet with a single look, there was always the risk of his secret being revealed. It was one thing to be known as one of the school's biggest perverts, but it was another thing entirely to be known as a perverted devil. Maybe he'd score some chicks who were into that. Issei turned his frown into a smile. He couldn't let rash judgments, or his daydreams, ruin his chances of securing that contract. "Yeah, I'm Issei. What's your name?" The boy smirked. "Are you sure you're a devil?" So that's how he's gonna play it, huh? Some clients wouldn't give their name for whatever reason. He rolled with it this time. At least he hadn't ribbed him for sucking at magic. "What were you expecting? Red horns, a trident?" "Perhaps." He put one hand in the pocket of his black trousers. "Close the door behind you." It wasn't the worst request, but Issei decided to get a better feel for who he was working with. Rias told him that he could get a feel for someone by how they performed simple tasks or how they treated others. "Can't you do it yourself?" The boy made a noise that sounded almost like a snort before turning around, his beige traveler's cloak whipping behind him. It covered his left shoulder and arm entirely, and looked pretty thick. How someone could wear that in the middle of summer was beyond him. "I'd rather avoid the hassle." Issei smiled. "No problem." Maybe this guy just wanted to avoid the heat. The pretty boy's room was sparsely decorated, a lone table with 2 cushions placed underneath it, a kitchen that had a fridge, dishwasher, and stove. Issei also saw a sword laying next to the boy, sheathed in a dark blue scabbard, but there was no TV, no electronics. It was almost like he was stepping to the past, or at least an older anime. "So," Issei said, taking a seat facing his client. "Where's the TV?" "Being repaired." "Good to know. Are you staying here on your own?" "Yes." Issei's smile grew. "Awesome. This place is like your own bachelor pad, you know?" A bachelor pad. If he had a place of his own, with food and rent and other necessities taken care of, it would be amazing. His client, on the other hand, didn't even react. "Seriously? You worried your parents are gonna find out or something?" "No." The emptiness packed in that one word snapped Issei out of his fantasy. As much as they ragged on him and mocked his life's passion, he couldn't imagine life without his parents. "Sorry." "Don't worry." That was quick. At least things wouldn't get awkward. "Why don't you tell me about yourself?" The pretty boy raised a thin eyebrow, like he was offended that he even asked that. "I like some things and dislike some other things. I've already accomplished my first goal and I'm busy working on my second one." Issei's frown returned. "Okay." Hopefully, it wouldn't go where he thought it was going, but he wasn't holding his breath. What about you? Time to show him how it was done. I like women in all forms, shapes, and sizes. I don't like two-faced bitches and arrogant bastards who act like they're the best thing on the planet. He grinned. And my goal is to get my own harem. A self-satisfied smirk crossed the boy's face then, wiping the grin off Issei's. He couldn't afford to let this guy's attitude get to him, but that was easier said than done. His client gave frustratingly vague answers to pretty simple questions. He didn't want to go outside and do something either. With every passing second, Issei could see that contract slipping further and further away. Eventually, his patience ran out. Why are you acting like this? Acting like what? The handsome prick's nonchalant tone made Issei scowl, and so did his lone-eyed stare. This whole angsty, brooding, arrogant loner shtick just pisses me off. He raised an eyebrow. Does it? Issei slammed his hand on the table, gritting his teeth and ignoring the lancing pain that seared through his body. Fortunately, the table hadn't cracked. Bastard, he said, the harsh word seething out. He wasn't some affable chick magnet like Kiba, this guy was a straight-up asshole. You called me here, and now you're wasting my time. Is this some kind of joke to you? It isn't, he said, making eye contact. He wasn't smirking anymore. I assumed you could handle it. There was a threat hidden there, but Issei had seen and heard worse. What makes you think anyone likes to be treated like crap? The boy sighed, so slight that he barely caught it. I treated you like I treat a good friend of mine. He wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a compliment, but he sounded dead serious, too serious to be taken lightly. It wouldn't kill you to be nice, you know? I'm trying to help you have a good time. You're right. The tension began to seep from Issei's frame, and eventually, he released his fist. Why'd you come out here? All he got was silence, but it didn't seem like he was being shut out. At least, he hoped he wasn't being shut out. I want to know more about how this world works. How you got that power sealed onto your hand. Issei's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't show his surprise. Sure, but don't be surprised if I don't reveal everything about us. You understand, right? The boy nodded, his previous smugness replaced with a stone-cold stare. Then let's get started. It took some time, but Issei was able to explain what he knew about devils and how they functioned, along with a basic rundown on the fallen angels and the church, the main factions that opposed the devils. He really didn't know a lot about his new life, even though he had been a devil for nearly 2 months. That couldn't stand. We should do this again sometime, the boy said after they finished up. Issei smiled. Glad to hear it. You can call me or text me whenever you want me to visit. Text? He repeated, like he had never heard of the concept before. He pulled out his cell phone and showed it off. You have one of these, right? For a second, Issei thought he'd say no, but the strange boy unveiled a pretty basic flip phone. These phones take some time to adjust to. His smile broadened. His client was actually admitting he wasn't Mr. Perfect and wasn't hiding behind aloof smugness. Don't worry about it. Could you do me a favor first? That depends on the favor. Since you want me to come back, you just have to give me appropriate compensation to make our contract official. It was a real confidence booster knowing that he was this close to getting a contract. However, nothing in life was guaranteed, and when he didn't respond, Issei worried that he pushed his luck too hard and too fast. Then the pretty boy shrugged. No problem. The response was music to his ears and made him want to do a victory dance. Instead, he smiled. No need to embarrass himself so quickly. Thanks, man. You won't regret this. His smirk returned, but Issei let it slide. Once he received his compensation, the contract was signed. Finally, months of constant failure had finally paid off. His first ever pact might have been with some guy who played brooding bad boy to the hilt, but he'd take it if it meant being one step closer to accomplishing his dream. He was going to be the harem king of the whole damn universe. If that's everything, let me get your number before I go. Let me give my name first. He extended his right hand. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. Nice to meet you, Issei said, giving Sasuke a firm handshake. In spite of his joy from forming the pact, he wasn't sure what to think about Sasuke, and it wasn't because of his attitude or his odd accent. No ordinary guy would know he had the boosted gear, especially when it wasn't activated. Maybe he was being paranoid, but he knew better than to take something at face value, no matter how nice it looked. Right now, what mattered was that he got the contract, and Sasuke wanted him to come back. For now, that was all he needed. The magic disguising Issei's arm was at its breaking point. It could be hours or even minutes before everyone learned that his left arm was actually a red gauntlet holding a dragon's soul. If he couldn't play it off as some weird cosplay, there was a good chance he wouldn't be the only one who got exposed. Erasing everyone's memories could only do so much to keep the existence of the supernatural secret, and he didn't want his friends to suffer because of his mistakes. On top of that, it hurt so damn much. It was like a boiling volcano, throbbing out of control when he least expected it, and burning every day without ever letting up. Even so, if it meant saving Rias, he'd sacrifice his arm every single time. Fortunately for him, there was a way to keep his arm from bugging out and relieve the pain in one fell swoop. For a little while, anyway. The dragon's essence had to be removed from his body, and the easiest way to do that was to have it sucked out of his fingers. It was also the most satisfying way, but it did take some time to finish, so when lunchtime came, he booked it to the old school building, where his after-school club had its meetings. Today, Aino was performing the ritual. She was always eager to help him and always lavished attention on his hand like he was some kind of king getting the world's greatest massage. Even a light touch was enough to drive him wild, trapping his mind in a pink haze. If he opened his eyes, all he would see was Aino sucking him off in that wet, tight robe. It wasn't actually necessary for her to be half naked, but she just finished taking a shower when he arrived. He definitely wasn't complaining about this coincidence. Then again, maybe this was her way of telling him that she wanted to get closer. It was hard to believe, but all that mattered right now was Akino's tongue licking him from base to tip, releasing his finger with a loud pop. "The dragon's essence is gone," she said, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "You should be fine, at least for now." Issei smiled, reclining against the sofa. His arm didn't throb or pulsate with searing heat. It was normal, and normal felt amazing. "I'm more than fine, and it's all thanks to you. The pleasure is all mine." She stood up and smoothed out her robe. Her black hair wasn't tied up in its usual ponytail today, a change he enjoyed. He also enjoyed her company, and it was a shame that he didn't get to spend more time with her. In between school and club activities, he didn't have much time to spare on other things, like learning more about the supernatural. He hadn't seen Sasuke in a couple of days, but it wouldn't look good if he went to him with nothing. Maybe if the boosted gear could double the amount of time he had to spend, then he wouldn't have a problem. Then again, he didn't have to break the laws of physics just to talk. "Hey Aino, can I ask you something?" he said, standing up before she could leave. "Always." Now came the hard part. "I was wondering if you could teach me more about devils and angels and all that supernatural stuff." A smirk crept onto Akino's face. "Why would you ask me?" Keeping his calm expression steady wasn't easy, but he couldn't break. "Because you helped me before. I mean, you taught me how to use magic, and you took time to explain things I didn't have a clue about." "Is that so?" He had to stay focused on his goal, not on her long legs or her bountiful, tempting cleavage. But it was hard, super hard. "I suppose I could help you, but what will Rias think? If she finds out we've been spending some private time behind her back, she'll get so jealous." The thought made him pale. He couldn't stand to see Rias in any kind of pain, but he couldn't pile his burdens on her packed schedule. "It's not like we'll be doing anything that'll make her jealous, right?" A part of him expected Rias to walk in on them, but the door remained closed, shutting them off from the rest of the world. Something that could easily be taken advantage of. As if on cue, Aino draped her arms around his neck and pulled him into a deep embrace. "You convinced me. I'd be happy to help you, Issei." Her breath was hot against his ear and she pressed herself against him, making his focus swim like he was fighting against a rising tide. They were still alone. "Thanks, Aino." Although, only time would tell if this backfired on him like the last time he was left alone with the dark-haired beauty. Sunset was rapidly approaching, the sun's orange rays illuminating Issei's room. The Occult Research Club was having their regular meeting at his place since the old school building was being cleaned. Not that there was a problem with that. Setbacks were a part of life that could easily be adapted to. Even if he did have an issue, he couldn't move the meeting somewhere else when the club president lived with him. "This month's contract numbers are in," she said. Rias sat across from him on his bed, surrounded by the other members of her peerage. Her crimson-red hair pulled around her body, which made it hard to focus on anything else. Fortunately for Issei, he managed to listen to his master. To nobody's surprise, Aino had accumulated the most contracts at 11 total, But Kaneko wasn't far behind with 10. It made sense. Her silver hair and small stature were perfect traits for a mascot or adorable younger sister, which made her really popular. He had covered for her on more than one occasion when she was double-booked, even if it didn't net him a contract of his own. Kiba was next with 8, which wasn't a surprise. Being a handsome guy with blonde hair, foreign looks and an infallibly polite attitude was a recipe for success. Asia, you have 3. Ria set her little teacup on its little plate. Hopefully, she didn't spill anything. He'd have to clean it. I'm proud of what you've accomplished so far. Keep up the good work. 3 in a month was more than it seemed. Asia was successful because she was a precious treasure that people wanted to protect and someone who would be cherished by anyone she met. Being a cute, blonde, foreign girl didn't hurt. Everyone else was happy, too, and Asia beamed at their praise. Thank you all so much. You're too kind. You deserve it, Issei said, smiling at his friend. Great job, Asia. Her face turned bright red as she returned his smile. As for you, Issei Rias took a sip from her teacup. You have 1 contract. Music to his ears. And with a completed service came compensation. Aika Aika Paradise, an erotic novel with an orange cover, was on his desk waiting to be read. As a connoisseur of adult entertainment, erotica of any kind was a great gift, doubly so when it wasn't terrible. I knew you could do it, Issei, Asia said, stirring him from his thoughts. Her smile hadn't faded. In fact, it had only grown. Congratulations. Kiba smiled. Way to go, dude. You finally got one. Not bad, Kaneko said. She drank from her cup. For a pervert. While she wasn't exactly smiling, her words lacked any bite to them, making it easy to take the compliment as it was. Looks like all your hard work's paid off, Akino said. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, but it felt like she was trying to devour him with her eyes. The smile on her face and her glossy lips drew him in even further. He tore his gaze away and smiled, cheeks flushed from all their compliments. And nothing more. Thanks, guys. But this is just the start. Just watch, next month, I'll be the guy with the most contracts. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Rias said. You'll have to work even harder in order to capitalize on your success, Issei. Get complacent and that contract of yours will be the only one you ever get. Leave it to Rias to keep him grounded without knocking him off his feet. Yeah, I know. She smiled. If you need any help, all you need to do is ask. What in the world did he do to receive her care and attention? It couldn't be because he was part of her peerage. Did he jump the gun when he asked Akino to help him out? Thankfully, he was saved from having to respond when his mother entered his room. She brought cookies, which was great. Something good to eat would keep the negativity away. Then she held out his old photo albums, filled with his baby pictures. So not great. At least it distracted Rias. He had caught her frowning, but a really pretty smile bloomed on her face as she looked at his pictures, quickly joining the others in cooing and giggling over how adorable he was. Even Kaneko was curious about the naked details of his tiny past, a set of words he never expected to come out of her mouth. These are some pretty nice pictures. Issei looked up and found that Kiba had taken a seat on his chair, reading through an album with a smile on his face. Someone was in high spirits today. What are you doing with my photo album, Kiba? I'm just taking a look. Don't worry, I haven't found any baby pictures. Yet, he thought, blowing out some hot air. He could try and take the album, but Kiba was a fast one. He'd make him work for it. At least he wouldn't get to see him naked. Now that would make him shrivel into a humiliated husk. Whatever. Issei stood up and went to the discarded bowl, taking it with him back to his seat. Man, this sucks, he said, taking a bite out of a cookie. The last thing I needed was for my mom to waltz in and bust my balls. I don't know about that. She seems like a great mother to me. Yeah, well, what would you know? Issei didn't dare put that thought into the open. As he continued to eat, his mother spoke to Rias and the other girls, smiling like she'd won the lottery. She had always wanted to show off his baby photos to a girl he brought home, and now that she could, her wish had come true. It must have validated all the pain she endured to bring him into this world, all the disappointment that his parents felt from having to pin their hopes and dreams on a guy like him. For now, anyway. As long as everyone was happy, then he couldn't really complain. Even if it was at his expense. I guess you're right. Kiba smiled again, but this one was off. It must be nice to have a family. Yeah, it definitely is. Then what Kiba said hit him, and he felt the strangest sense of déjà vu. Wait, Are you saying that you don't have a family either? He didn't answer, which was all the confirmation he needed. Here he was bitching about his mother when Kiba didn't have a mother at all. Real genius at work here. He was about to apologize, but he never got the chance. Hey Issei, Kiba said in a tone that was colder than ice. Issei looked up and gulped, startled by how intensely Kiba examined the picture in front of him. Do you recognize this photo? The photo in question showed Issei and a child with chestnut brown hair sitting in Issei's living room, playing on a pair of Game Boys. A sword with an elaborate white sheath was set against the wall, next to the fireplace. Yeah. We used to play together when we were kids, but he had to move away when his dad got a job overseas. Come to think of it, he couldn't remember that kid's name. Kiba nodded. I see. Do you remember anything about the sword? It belonged to that kid's dad, but that's all I can remember. It was a long time ago, you know? He smiled in an attempt to break the mood, but it withered under Kiba's steely gaze. The hatred in his eyes was palpable, and that eerie smile didn't do anything to offset it. I guess anything's possible. Issei blinked. You're telling me. He chuckled briefly. I never expected to find a holy sword in a place like this. A scowl flickered onto his face. It disappeared as quickly as it came. You okay, man? I am. There's nothing for you to worry about. Kiba closed the photo album and handed it to Issei. There was something fishy about all of this. From Kiba's lack of parents to how he had reacted to seeing the holy sword in the photo, it didn't paint a pretty picture of whatever he had gone through. Want one? Issei asked, holding out a cookie. Thanks, but I'm not hungry. Issei shrugged. If you say so. An unsettling silence filled the air between them, too suffocating to be awkward. He needed to break it. You know you can talk about whatever's bothering you, right? We're all here for you. Kiba smiled. It felt forced. I know. It turned out that Kiba didn't know. If he did, he didn't care enough to tell him anything. Not that Issei was any better. If someone told him the exact same thing, it would go out the other ear by the time they were done talking. It was easier to bottle things up and ignore them instead of trying to trust someone and have that trust broken. Still here? Sasuke asked. Issei shook his head, regaining his bearings. Yeah, of course. He had just finished telling Sasuke how peerages worked and their greater purpose in the underworld, to boost the devil's dwindling population by reincarnating humans and monsters of all kinds through the evil peace system, giving those newly christened devils a chance to earn enough prestige to start their own peerages one day. It was also the subject of his after-school lesson with Akino. The only problem he had was that it was too much information to take in all at once. At least Akino had taken it in stride when he told her he wanted to take a break. It would suck if she stopped teaching him because she thought he was lazy. He needed to know this stuff if he wanted to have his own peerage one day, and it was the main reason why he was still in Sasuke's hotel room. Do you have any questions? Issei asked, closing his notebook. Can a devil leave their master? They can, but most force their way out. He didn't need to look at his notes to answer this question. Those guys are called stray devils. There's as many reasons why devils go rogue as there are stray devils, but most of them leave because they want to fulfill some desire of theirs. And they can't do it while they're still connected to their peerage. Something's recently been brought to my attention. A purpose. A frown creased Issei's face. They get so caught up in this desire that nothing else remains except whatever drove them to leave their peerage behind. They'll even try to access the power locked away by their evil peace. He grimaced as the image of the last stray they fought crossed his mind. It isn't pretty. In contrast, Sasuke's expression was as smooth as ever. Talking from experience? Yep. All the stray devils I've encountered were monsters that gave up whatever humanity they had for more power. You can't reason with them once they've gone that far. I thought you were fighting for Rias. You thought wrong. Issei took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs before he exhaled. He was letting fear of something that would probably never happen distract him. I can see why they'd leave their peerage. He flinched. How? As long as they haven't fulfilled their ambition, they'll never be content with what they have. I remembered the reason why I fight. My purpose for living. The thought trapped him in an iron vice. How would you know? I just finished telling you about stray devils like a minute ago. They're rejecting who they are. Once they realize that, they'll be desperate for change. I'm going to destroy the Excalibur. That alone is my purpose. Issei smiled, a tight, thin line that stretched his mouth wide. Talking from experience? There couldn't be any other reason how he knew why a devil went stray. A slight smirk was his answer. Something's bothering you. So much for trying to keep things on the down low. He could try and play it off, but it would only make Sasuke more suspicious, leading to questions he didn't want to answer. Get it off your chest before you do something you'll regret. That was easier said than done. For a moment, he considered telling Sasuke, even though he didn't have to, but he didn't. He was still a stranger, and trust was a hard thing to give. Although, that also meant he didn't have to keep up appearances. As long as he didn't reveal too much, he wouldn't have to worry. After all, he did tell Kiba not to keep things to himself. It's about a friend of mine, Issei said, staring at Sasuke's visible eye. Kiba. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. I know someone with that name. Wait, seriously? When Sasuke nodded, Issei burst into laughter, releasing some of the tension in his shoulders and neck. Even Sasuke seemed to find it amusing, judging from the hint of a smile that crossed his face. It's probably a coincidence, he said. Unless your friend has a dog for a partner. Nah. He imagined Kiba standing alongside a large dog with a sword in its mouth and laughed even harder. It took him some time to stop. It's definitely a coincidence. Besides, Kiba's his last name. I see. His smile faded into a smooth mask. What happened to Kiba? He was fine the last time I saw him. Well, physically at least. He took in a deep, deep breath. Last night, we were sent to kill a stray devil, but Kiba barely did anything. The only reason why he didn't get hurt was because a teammate of ours saved his ass. Our master really laid into him for what he did, but he didn't care. Blood boiling in his veins, anger making him scowl. He took another deep breath to calm his nerves. I knew he'd been acting strange, so I tried to talk to him. He didn't want to at first, but I was able to get through to him. Issei smiled, in spite of himself. I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he told me why he changed. He wants to destroy the Excalibur and get his revenge. Revenge? The hairs on the back of Issei's neck stood on end, goosebumps crawling over his skin from the sudden chill. Yeah, revenge. After they came home, Rias had told him and Asia about the Holy Sword Project. It was designed by the church to grant its subjects the ability to wield holy swords, including the legendary Excalibur. However, it was a total failure. They disposed of all the children that were involved in the experiments. Kiba had been one of them. Learning about what he had gone through put his past treatment of the guy into a new light. Unfortunately, he couldn't make amends because he had no idea where Kiba was. He'd skipped school and wasn't answering his phone. Before, he'd probably be happy with Prince Pretty out of the way, but now, he couldn't get him out of his mind. Let's stop here, Sasuke said, startling Issei. He had been dead quiet ever since he mentioned revenge, staring at nothing with laser-focused eyes. But now, that gaze was focused on him. Why? Issei said, forcing himself not to look away. I need a break. It was probably nothing, but Sasuke clearly wasn't in the mood to argue. Issei was starting to build a rapport with the guy, and chances were that pressing him for answers would backfire. For now, the best option was to play it safe. Fine by me. We'll just pick up where we left off next time. Issei climbed to his feet and picked up his notebook. Like it or not, his work here was done. Sasuke stood up as well. And smiled. Thanks for telling me about your friend. He returned the smile. He didn't know if he'd see it again. Thanks for listening. His smile grew as he went to the door. The chill from earlier had subsided, soothing his frayed nerves. Telling Sasuke about his problems had helped, more than he expected. It wasn't ideal, but all he could do was trust Kiba would be safe. Besides, maybe some time alone would let the guy clear his head before he did something stupid. It was raining that night. Kiba wandered through lifeless streets and empty alleyways, not caring that his shirt and trousers clung to his skin from the constant downpour. Sleep eluded him after returning home, so he decided to go for a walk. Clear his head a little. The fact that he spent most of the day walking was inconsequential. Last night, Rias had slapped him. He deserved it. His lack of focus endangered the team and nearly cost him his life. Failing her made his heart ache with guilt. She gave him a new name and a new life, free of horrors no child should ever experience. But that same life teemed with mundane drudgery that brought him no true satisfaction. He deluded himself into thinking that he could live while his grievance was left unavenged. And in the process, he forgot where he came from. If Issei hadn't shown him that photo, there was a very good chance that he'd live the rest of his very long life engulfed in a deluge of lies. We are friends, aren't we? Issei was wrong. It wouldn't be right for him to have friends. He didn't deserve that. And he wasn't willing to go back. Something twitched at his senses, the rush of air around him, movement too subtle for ordinary eyes to catch. His eyesight was anything but ordinary. A devil's vision grew sharper after the sun set. Spotting what had moved was simple for a creature of the night. A crow was perched on a nearby power line, staring at him with gray, human eyes. Kiba blinked, but when his eyes opened, the crow had disappeared. It must have been something his sleep-deprived mind conjured up. No one he knew had a crow for a familiar. Undeterred, Kiba moved on. Just as he reached an intersection, a man crossed his path, tightly clutching his ribs. Blood flowed from a gash in his side, staining his fingers and his green robes red. "Help me!" Kiba ignored his plea. Helping this dying priest wasn't worth the effort. He seemed to be running from something, but he was only able to take a few more steps before he collapsed. His face was pulled into a pained grimace as the light left his eyes. Maybe he was innocent, after all. He shook his head. All priests were sinners. Another man arrived, dressed in a green coat with gold trim that covered his white tunic and pants, protecting him from the harsh elements. The silver-haired man's sword was rather unusual. Its long blade slanted off to a ridge on one side and 3 curved edges on the other, the bottom edge guarding the pommel. "Yoo-hoo! It's been a while, hasn't it? I'm simply elated that the playboy of the scum underworld came to pay me a visit." Kiba frowned. "Freed Selzen. You were hiding in town this whole time?" The exorcist's red eyes glinted, revealing his hateful malice. Lightning crashed from high above. "You guessed it. Give this man a prize. But enough about me. Where did all your little friends run off to? We can't have a proper reunion if everyone isn't here." They took a rain check. A sword with a black blade and golden hilt appeared from a red portal, the product of his sacred gear, sword birth. "And unfortunately for you," Kiba clutched the sword's pommel, "I'm not in the best of moods." Freed cackled, an ugly, harsh sound that got on his nerves. "What perfect timing! I've been wanting to give this bad boy a real test, but killing priests just isn't what it used to be." The sword began to glow, brighter than a star. Its golden aura was unmistakable. "It can't be." "Oh, but it is," Freed replied, a sickening grin on his disgusting face. "It's the legendary Excalibur." The sight of the holy sword made fury bubbling from deep within. "Where did you get it?" "That would be telling. I'd rather use this exalted blade to kill your shitty devil friend and his little church whore, but as penance for your previous sins, I'll just have to kill you first." Freed charged, faster than Kiba expected, but he was able to block the sword with his own blade. He shivered, gripped so tight that his palms began to ache. "You won't lay a finger on either of them." Freed's grin didn't waver. "Is that so? And what, pray tell, will you do to stop me?" Lightning flashed, illuminating the two fighters, an exorcist who had strayed from the church and a devil who had strayed from his master. Neither one of them gave an inch. His destiny was right in front of him, waiting to be seized. All he had to do was put his best foot forward. "I'll kill you." Kiba pushed forward, slicing against Freed's holy sword as he tried to cut his jugular, only for the exorcist to leap a few meters away. "You'll kill me? Now there's something I never thought you'd say." He laughed, tongue lolling out of his mouth like a ravenous dog. "Good job. But it won't be enough to save you or your friends." Not if he had anything to say about it. With a swing of his sword, numerous black tendrils erupted from his blade, racing towards the holy sword and ensnaring it in its maw. However, the Excalibur's holy light was too potent, snapping the tendrils completely. "That was cute," Freed said, cackling once again. "But it looks like that plan failed." "Ah well, you win some, you lose some." Kiba smirked. On the contrary, everything went exactly as planned. The Holy Eraser was a technique designed to absorb light, leaving darkness in its wake. The fact that it wasn't able to do so to Freed's weapon only proved that it was the real deal, beyond any shadow of a doubt. The smirk faded, like a wisp snuffed out. "You're going to die tonight, Freed. And when I'm done with you, I'll destroy your infernal weapon." Swords clashed once more as Kiba thrust at Freed's stomach. He used the momentum of Freed's parry to spin on the spot and slash at his flank. Freed only needed a half step backwards to block, but it put him on the back foot, allowing Kiba to strike again, eager to strip his defense apart. Infernal, huh? The Excalibur suddenly sliced through the muscles in Kiba's right bicep. Blood seeped from the wound and burned, turning into a dark red gas. The pain was so immense that Kiba collapsed to his knees, grasping at his limp arm. Didn't you hear? This holy sword despises devils. Getting cut by one must feel like hell on earth. Kiba gritted his teeth. This was nothing but a flesh wound. It wouldn't hinder him at all. Shut up. Just shut your damn mouth. Make me. Clutching his sword in his left hand, Kiba lunged forward and swept Freed off his feet. That's cheating. Kiba jumped into the air, sword held high. He didn't care. Just before he could stab Freed, his target skittered behind him like a rat. A toothy grin was on his face, but it was anything but mirthful. Nice move, kid. But a small green sigil appeared next to Freed's ear. Shit! The distraction was all Kiba needed to close the gap, sword arm stretched out like he was wielding a lance. Once again, Freed dodged. I hate to cut this short, but someone more important is calling. He twisted in midair and tossed something at him. It's been fun, though. See you. A shadow moved in between them, catching the object and throwing it in the air. It exploded in a flash of blinding light. Freed landed on the road just as the shadow coalesced, revealing a figure clad in a beige cloak that clung like a shell, damp and heavy. Look what we have here. Freed's red pupils narrowed into slits, teeth bared in a scowl. Another pretty boy too stupid to understand what he got himself into. Kiba stepped forward, but the pretty boy raised his right hand. Let me handle him. His first instinct was to refuse. Regardless of his intent or apparent skill, it was Kiba's fight, and some stranger wanting to help would likely end in disaster. If worst came to worst, Freed would kill the stranger, and he would get another chance to fight him, meaning that he had no problem with letting the newcomer take center stage. It's your funeral, Kiba said, stepping out of the way. Freed grinned. Took the words out of my mouth. He sprinted forward, preparing to slash the boy's torso open and expose his innards. He would surely die if Freed connected, and Freed would be distracted by the joy of a fresh kill, giving Kiba enough time to catch him off guard and plunge his blade into his heart. All he had to do was let the boy die. In the time it had taken for Kiba to make a decision, Freed had closed the gap. The Excalibur arced upwards, about to take another victim. Only for it to be blocked by a silver blade. Kiba's grip on his own blade relaxed, just a little bit. If Freed was surprised, it didn't show. He swung the holy sword again with an urgency that he hadn't previously shown, striking at different angles with impossibly fluid motion, twirling from thrusts into slicing movements with ease. Somehow, the stranger wasn't just able to hold his own, he was parrying all of Freed's strikes with one hand, moving only when necessary. He made it look insultingly easy. As time went on, Freed circled around the stranger each time he saw an opening, picking up speed until he left after images in his wake. It was all in vain, it seemed, as the stranger was still able to keep up without making a mistake. For a fleeting moment, Kiba saw the red glow in the stranger's visible eye as Freed dashed into his guard from behind. That was when the stranger spun and lashed out with a kick that caught Freed in the stomach, making him bounce off the watery street. Freed caught himself and hopped to his feet off a handspring, standing a fair distance away from Kiba. Son of a bitch! He shouted, clutching his ribs and coughing violently. A scowl darkened Freed's face once again, eyes bulging in their sockets. Then his customary grin returned, sanding over the cracks in his facade. You ain't half bad for a dead man. I'd consider showing mercy on your wayward soul, but you've stuck your nose where it doesn't belong, so now I have to cut it off. Clearly, Freed hadn't thought of wiping people's memories. Murder was a much simpler solution. Who are you serving? The stranger asked. Kiba shook his head. He already knew what Freed would say. I wouldn't want to ruin the surprise. Right on cue. Freed moved at blistering speeds, planning to skewer the stranger straight through. Except Freed wasn't aiming at the stranger. He was aiming at him. Tracking Freed's movements was significantly easier when he was fighting someone else. It didn't mean he wasn't capable. If the stranger could overcome Freed with one hand, then so could he. Just as Freed came into range, Kiba knocked the Excalibur away from his body and stabbed his chest. All he hit was air. You're too slow. Freed was behind him. No time to counter. Had to make some distance. He focused all his energy into his legs. Jumped forward. The tip of the holy sword grazed his back. Searing pain lanced through his spine. The world around him warped, just before his flesh was punctured. But he was safe. Kiba turned, stopped in his tracks. The Excalibur jutted out of the stranger's chest. His cloak was stained. The boy stared at him with a gray eye. He'd taken his place. Focus on what's in front of you, Kiba. Turgid red liquid dribbled out of his mouth. How did he know his name? Lightning burst out of his body, electrocuting Freed. He collapsed, face colliding against the pavement. Limbs twitched, then went still. Kiba breathed. His heartbeat stabilized, pounding roar giving way to a steady stream. He took a step forward, then another. Now that the shock had begun to subside, it was time to check Freed's vitals. Make sure he was out for the count. He crouched in front of Freed, pressing his fingers against his neck. It was warm, faintly pulsing in a slow but steady rhythm, heating up his freezing hand. A spark jolted him for a split second, long enough for him to spring to his feet. He hadn't actually been shocked, but that didn't matter. Freed was still alive, like a cockroach that just wouldn't die. Whatever process Freed had gone through to wield the holy sword must have made him more powerful than any ordinary human. Kiba dismissed his black blade and forged another sword, one with a silver blade and golden hilt. It was long and straight, unlike the abomination that Freed clung to. A dim glow ebbed from the holy sword, waning until it was nothing more than cold metal. It boggled the mind how scum like Freed could get his hands on the Excalibur. It might have been a fragment of a much greater whole, but it was still an incredibly dangerous and rare weapon that the church took great pains to protect. Freed had used it to kill an innocent person. Someone who sacrificed his life to save him, a total stranger. A spectator that clung to life while others died, unable to save anyone. How could he hope to destroy Excalibur if he couldn't beat one stray exorcist on his own? Freed would have escaped if it wasn't for that stranger, and what happened? He died. For him. Kiba stabbed Freed's heart. Fresh blood gushed from his corpse. The rain washed it away. He was off howling to the Grim Reaper now. The Excalibur had to be destroyed. He stepped over Freed. His sword plunged downward, but it was stopped. Someone was holding his wrist, an iron vice that wouldn't give. Kiba glared at the interloper, teeth bared in a scowl. Then he took a good look at him, and felt his anger die from shock. How are you still alive? Freed killed you. He killed a clone, the stranger replied, staring at him with mismatched eyes. Kiba looked around, but he couldn't find any sign of the so-called clone's body. Why did you intervene? I needed answers. From Freed or himself, he didn't say. How frustrating. Kiba's wrist began to ache. Blood pumped in his ears, a quiet roar that dulled the torrential rain pattering against the concrete and his own breathing. Something wasn't adding up. I saw a familiar before I found Freed, a crow. The crow had gray eyes, just like you. There's no way you would have known that Freed was coming before your clone joined us, since your crow disappeared. Who are you, and how do you know my name? A moment passed. Then another, before the man let go of his wrist. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. Your friend Issei told me about you. Kiba scowled. Of course Issei had to be involved. What else did he say? Enough. The rain drenched Sasuke's black hair, but he wasn't fazed at all. Why did you kill Freed? Kiba didn't flinch, carefully schooling his features to maintain control over himself. He's a maniac and a murderer. There's no way someone like him could ever be redeemed. Is that so? He wasn't offended on Freed's behalf. It seemed as if he was gauging Kiba's conviction. I did everyone a favor by killing him. Sasuke nodded once. He crouched and picked up the Excalibur without being burned, turning it in his hand and examining it with a critical eye. If he wasn't a devil, and didn't have angel's wings, then he might have been a magician. One of his clients was talented at magic, and magic was a versatile art. Although, his young client didn't show any proficiency at martial arts or swordplay. Freed could have given us valuable information. Kiba scoffed. How would you get him to talk? I have my ways. Sasuke gave the Excalibur an experimental swing. It didn't activate. Just looking at it made his bicep wound throb. It would heal on its own, that much he was sure of, but as long as that thing existed, the pain would never go away. What is this sword? It's a fragment of the original Excalibur, forged into a sword. Why is this Excalibur so significant? Kiba stared at Sasuke in the face of this revelation, not sure what to believe. It's King Arthur's most iconic weapon. King Arthur was an ancient king whose deeds were so great that he became a legend. The Excalibur helped him win many battles. Sasuke's expression remained impassive. I see. The grip on his sword tightened, stealing his focus. How is it that you know about devils, but you don't know about the Excalibur? I hadn't heard of it before tonight. A brief pause ensued, then Sasuke looked at him again. How did Freed find it? It doesn't matter. Kiba scowled. We have to destroy it. Sasuke frowned. If Freed was still alive, we would have learned where he obtained his Excalibur. We also would have learned who Freed was involved with. What's your point? It was then that Sasuke's gaze turned from inquisitive to piercing. Learn what you need to learn before you choose to kill in cold blood. That way, your revenge will be honest. What did it matter if his revenge was honest or not? Kiba spared a glance at Freed's corpse. A world without Freed was better than one where Freed could run rampant, but the reason for his death that didn't sit well with him. It was a mockery of what he aimed to achieve. Worthless. Sasuke's words began to make sense in that light, but that clarity was muddled by the reality of what he just did. What he still had to do. We have to destroy the Excalibur. Kiba made eye contact with this strange, errant knight. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could spell disaster for all of us. You can help me, or you can get out of the way and let me do it myself. His heart raced, anticipation pumping adrenaline through his veins. In moments, he'd get his answer. In moments, he'd get to destroy the Excalibur. Get back. Kiba did. The holy sword flew down the street, spinning in a straight line and showing no signs of slowing down. Sasuke pointed at it, hand crackling with electricity, and in the time it took Kiba to blink, an electric spear caught the Excalibur right in the middle, stopping it instantly. The spear split, forking in countless directions. The Excalibur, bane of his life, stood no chance. Kiba raced towards its remains as they fell, dead to the world. In a moment of daring, he crouched and touched one of the pieces, just to make sure that Sasuke succeeded. He didn't feel anything. He didn't feel a single thing. Sasuke joined him, staring at the Excalibur's fragments. Thank you, Kiba said. Thank you for destroying the Excalibur. You're welcome. Sasuke gathered the few pieces that weren't destroyed and placed them together. Raising his hand to his mouth, Sasuke formed a strange sign and blew out flames much hotter than a furnace. Steam billowed from the charred ruin that was formerly the Excalibur. Only tiny scraps of burnt metal remained rather than ash. Perhaps it was just the steel's durability. Damn it. Maybe not. What's the matter? Sasuke clenched his fist, before dropping it at his side. It's nothing. Kiba stood, sobered by how even Sasuke struggled. He still had far to go. Sasuke stood up and stared at Kiba for a long moment, boring into his very soul. Don't walk the path of revenge alone, Kiba. You'll crumble under the weight of your burden. Kiba frowned. I'll be the judge of that. Then make sure your friends don't try to bring you back by force. That wouldn't happen. He wouldn't give them the chance to fight. None of them would resort to violence anyway. None expect Issei, perhaps. He was, by far, the most unpredictable member of Ria's peerage. Yet he hadn't found him. Sasuke had. For whatever reason, Sasuke was trying to help him. He even risked his life to save his. Why did you save me? Sasuke's head tilted to its side. I won't let anyone die if I can save them. He wanted, so desperately, to know what he'd say if he couldn't save someone, if he knew the anguish of being powerless, the pain that came from watching his loved ones die so that he could cling to life. But was it necessary? How can you throw your life away for someone you don't know? Sasuke smiled, even as the rain poured down his face. That's just the kind of guy I am. He disappeared. And once again, Kiba was all alone. On the way to the old school building, Issei gave Kiba a call. He was starting to obsess over waiting for some kind of response like some clingy boyfriend. It made him imagine some chick's boys love fantasy coming to life, which just wasn't his style. He needed to know if the situation had changed, rather than being left in the dark, clinging to a vain hope. Hello? Issei grinned. Kiba, how are you doing? I'm okay. Awesome, man. Kiba chuckled. You were worried, weren't you? Well, yeah, of course I was. Why wouldn't I be? I appreciate that. He trailed off, filling the silence with dead air. Just don't come looking for me. I know you want to help, but there are things I have to do before I can come back. Issei's tongue clicked. No, it wasn't all bad. He was getting an answer, and that was better than getting silence. Did you tell the president what you're telling me? I did. And this was something he could settle for. Keep in touch, alright? Another pause. When I get the time. Cool. Stay safe, Kiba. You too. Kiba was fine and he was willing to talk. That meant there was a chance, and that chance renewed Issei's hope. Now, he could focus on his own business. Once Issei stepped inside the old school building, he took a moment to marvel at how well it had been cleaned. He could practically see his reflection in the floor, the windows didn't have a speck of dust on them, an aromatic fragrance hung in the air, and even the walls had a fresh coat of paint. He wanted Ria's cleaning team for himself. They really outdid themselves, and the club room was just as clean as the halls were. Aquino lounged on one of the sofas, reading a book, one leg crossed over another. No wet robe today. At least the school uniform was just modest enough to avoid censure while still being revealing. It was tied around the chest and the skirt showed a lot of skin. Whoever designed it was a genius. Welcome, Issei, Aquino said. Do you want anything to drink? Issei smiled. Thanks, but I'm fine. He set his bag on the desk and pulled out his notebook and a pen. Just before he could sit down, Aquino held out her hand. Come sit next to me. She patted the seat to her left, flashing a grin that left him weak in the knees. I'd really appreciate it. If she wanted to get closer, then who was he to refuse? He gave himself enough space to let him focus without alienating his teacher. Once he was comfortable, Aquino faced him, all business. Come to think of it, Aquino did call him on short notice. I forgot to ask, but why aren't we meeting after school? I have to attend a meeting with Rias. It's very urgent. Since we don't have much time, I'll answer whatever questions you might have. That was all cool with him. What can you tell me about the Excalibur? Even if there weren't any urgent meetings or impromptu lessons, he'd still want to know more about this sword. It wasn't just a mythological object, it was real and Kiba had suffered because of it. How much do you know about holy swords? I know that they're big trouble for devils. I also know about the Holy Sword Project. What I want to know is why the Excalibur is so special. It can't just be because it belonged to King Arthur, right? Aquino chuckled, making him smile. Not necessarily. The Excalibur was an incredibly powerful holy sword and King Arthur did do great things with it, but it was destroyed after the Great War. The church's alchemists forged the Excalibur's remains into 7 different swords and imbued them with a unique power. One might grant its wielder rapid movement, or the ability to turn invisible. Issei nodded, writing everything down in his notebook. Why didn't they just reforge the original? Assuming that they could? Imagine if one of their exorcists goes rogue and takes the Excalibur with them. The church could kill this rogue exorcist and retrieve the Excalibur. Even if the exorcist escapes, the church will still have 6 Excaliburs with roughly the same level of power. That can happen if only one Excalibur exists. So it's insurance. Exactly. It would be utterly disastrous if a sword that powerful fell into the wrong hands. The original Excalibur is said to be more powerful than the 7 Excaliburs combined. She groaned, a bright red blush staining her cheeks. I can only imagine how much destruction it could unleash. Now he knew why the church even considered doing something so heinous. If exorcists who could naturally wield the Excalibur were in short supply, making their own seemed like the next step. It was terrible in every possible way, but he could see the twisted logic behind this crime. Aquino exhaled, and the color in her cheeks regained its regular hue. That's why the church only grants its most devout or loyal exorcists the opportunity to wield an Excalibur. That way, none of them will try to defect and give their Excalibur to one of the church's enemies. After he finished jotting down some more notes, Issei loosened his grip on his pen. Makes sense to me. Aquino uncrossed her legs, crossing her right leg over her left. She smirked. Is that so? Can you name a potential consequence that might arise from recreating the original Excalibur? Issei began to fiddle with his pen, searching for an answer. It could be used to exterminate the devils. Doing that would probably spark another war, but this hypothetical wielder could get pretty far before they're put down. How morbid. Aquino licked her lips. I like the way you think. Which was something he had to get used to when it came to Aquino's tendency to get caught up in the moment. It was kind of hot, but he didn't want to get on her bad side. He wasn't prepared for that. Thanks. He flicked his pen back and forth. Listen, I appreciate this. What you're doing for me. I'm really learning a lot. Aquino's salacious smile shifted into something earnest. Thank you? You're really sweet. I never thought I'd be teaching anyone before you came along. Really? I thought you'd done this before. Nope. You were my first time. He breathed deeply, trying his best to stop his heart from pounding so fast. Akino giggled, covering her mouth like some classy noblewoman. As soon as she was settled, she put her hand on her lap. Man, she was good. My secret, if you can call it that, is that I know how to satisfy my clients. Each client has a unique personality, and needs that have to be met. Knowing how to satisfy those needs without losing the client is the key to my success. Issei smiled. Now that's a winning strategy. If he could use that to make more contracts, he could start winning too. I'm glad you think so. In a flash, Akino had taken hold of his right hand. He hadn't even noticed Akino had shimmied her way across until he felt her bare thigh. Not only that, his pen was on top of his notebook. Yep, definitely good. Do you mind me doing this? Issei shook his head. His mind wandered, taking in her sweet, intoxicating scent, her dazzling violet eyes and plump, wet lips. All he could think about was when the other shoe would drop, when the fairy tale would come to an end. It's my turn to ask a question. Go ahead. She gave his hand a squeeze. You're worried about Kiba, aren't you? It was like a dagger had struck Issei's heart. Yeah. Who wouldn't be? Trust him. It's good that you care about his well-being, but he's going through a lot, and anger like his doesn't discriminate. Sometimes you just need some time to come to terms with your feelings. A sigh escaped his lips. You're right. I just can't get him out of my mind. Her smile soothed him. He'll come back, and if he doesn't, we can go to him and let him know he isn't alone. Everything she was saying wasn't really new, but hearing it helped a lot. It showed that Akino really cared. Issei grinned. Can't argue with that. Another squeeze. Issei made eye contact with Akino. The moment was electric, supercharged from the tension in the air. Her lips parted, but he wouldn't make a move until he was sure he was in the clear. Maybe I shouldn't. Akino turned away. In spite of her apparent doubt, she still clutched his hand like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. What's the matter? Moments passed as the lustful spark made way for good old anxiety. If Akino wanted to say anything, he'd give her the time to talk. There's this guy I have a crush on. I know he's attracted to me and I think he's pretty cute too. The problem is that a good friend of mine has eyes for him. She'd get mad if I made a move, and I feel like I'd be intruding on their relationship. I don't want to drive him away either. So, Akino had a crush on him. Oddly enough, it wasn't as shocking as he imagined. It was actually kind of comforting to know that Akino wasn't fooling around. But it would have been easier to ignore if it was just some game to her. Now he had to phrase his response without giving too much away. I don't think you have anything to worry about. This guy's probably a virgin who gets cock-blocked every time he's about to score. Even if he did get a chance, I doubt he'd know what to do, or know how to deal with someone wanting him that much. Akino stared at him, a slight frown on her face. Rias hasn't slept with you? Nope. He rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. And I'm still single. Her frown faded, replaced by a sly smile. That's okay. You're probably more experienced than I am. Issei blinked. Did a double take. Huh! I thought that I'd been deflowered by some handsome knight? Unfortunately, I haven't found him yet, so I'm still a virgin. For now. She winked at him. His face heated up from a bright blush, and he frantically searched for something to distract him. Try as he might, he was glued to Akino's face, from her little smirk to the lust in her lidded eyes. You're so easy to tease. Maybe I just enjoy the attention. He paused. That was nothing but a slip of the tongue. Yet, it wasn't wrong. His fantasy was coming to life in ways he never could have fathomed. Maybe that was another reason why he didn't want to choose. He could indulge without having to take a risk. Without having to be judged and found wanting. It feels good, doesn't it? It was, but it was also fleeting. The dream would end and he'd have to come to terms with feelings he tried to ignore. At least no one hadn't barged in on them. There's no risk. He left it there, letting the silence linger. It was peaceful, safe. Maybe you should take a risk. The worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't work out. And besides, I won't bite unless you asked me to. Issei smiled. It was forced. That's the problem. The bell rang. They were still holding hands. We can pick up where we left off tomorrow. Aquino cupped his cheek with her free hand. Sound good? He leaned into her touch. It does. She smiled. That's what I like to hear. The sky was clear and the sun was bright as Issei trailed behind Asia and Kaneko. When he first became a devil, the sun bothered him like he was some low-rent vampire, leaving him weak and lazy. It took some getting used to, but he built up a tolerance, allowing him to walk among the living without having to cover up and draw attention to himself. Now, he could take in the heat and enjoy the sun's warmth. He could also keep one ear on the conversation without getting lost. Most of the time, he was able to respond if he was called on, so it wasn't like he was snubbing them. His mind was still buzzing from the closeness he shared with Aquino. She made the most boring topics engaging and interesting with her seductive, charming voice. He yearned for her touch, her soft and smooth hands that fondled him with expert precision and left him aching for more. If she wasn't lying about her experience, it meant she'd only get better at playing the noble maiden. She was a master at being the worldly, mysterious older girl. They reached an intersection while he recounted the many ways Aquino had ensnared him in amorous desire. Kaneko was about to part ways with him. A pensive frown tightened up her face. What's up, Kaneko? Issei asked. She nodded. Just worried about Kiba. I wouldn't worry. He said he was fine. You actually spoke to him? She asked, before shaking her head. If he's fine, then I guess there's nothing to worry about. Issei smiled. He'll come back. Trust me. Issei's right, Asia said. I don't think Kiba will abandon us. We're his friends, and friends shouldn't abandon their friends, right? Yeah, they shouldn't, Kaneko said. Let's hope you're right. After they exchanged goodbyes, Kaneko set off, leaving him with Asia. It was strange seeing someone as tough as Kaneko so down about some guy, but they were actually friends who enjoyed each other's company. Issei felt someone tug on his school shirt. May I ask you something? Asia said. Sure, he said, casting everything else away. Where were you during lunch? I was studying. If I want to get better, I have to improve my mind too, right? Yes, of course. I just miss you. Issei chuckled. Don't worry, Asia. I'm not going anywhere. She smiled. It was warm, inviting the promise of something more. You've been working really hard, haven't you? He grinned at her. That's right. I've already got 2 clients, and I can't get more if I slack off. Asia pouted, which creased her face. Who's your second client? This rich guy. I think he's a foreigner, but his Japanese is really good. It's probably better than mine. His laugh was half-hearted, but Asia hung on to his every word. Initially, the guy didn't take him seriously, and after he got drunk, he busted his balls for sucking at magic. It was irritating, but after experiencing Sasuke's loner act, dealing with all of that wasn't so hard. Before long, something between them clicked and their time together went smoothly. One thing stood out about the guy. He was sharp, way sharper than he thought he'd be. Kind of like Sasuke, actually. Maybe he befriended some international executive, or a playboy that moonlighted as a defender of justice. Anyway, we got along and he liked me enough to form a contract. He even gave me a neat painting. Is that the painting hanging in your room? Yeah. Her smile returned. It's a beautiful piece. Issei rubbed the back of his neck. Never knew you liked art. I traveled a lot when I was in Italy, as part of my duties. Her green eyes were practically shining. Whenever I had free time, I always tried to visit the local museums, or take a look at the city's architecture. I was amazed by how these artists and architects expressed themselves, and I was mesmerized by how I could appreciate their work centuries after they passed on. Asia's smile turned wistful. Her grip on his shirt tightened. I wanted to share my gift the same way those artists shared their talents, and heal everyone who needed my help, no matter who they were. No matter what happened to me. For all her purity and kindness, she was still cast off like some heathen just because she healed the devil by accident. It said a lot that she was willing to move forward instead of lamenting her twisted fate. That's amazing, Asia. Besides, there's lots of museums here in Japan, and they have lots of classy paintings and sculptures. You've got nothing to worry about. Not that he knew many. His interest in old Japanese artwork was mostly limited to the erotic stuff, like The Dream of the Fisherman's Wife. Unfortunately, I haven't had the time to visit a museum yet. That's too bad, But hey, you're spending that time getting used to a new country and learning a new language. Not only that, you're meeting new clients and making contracts. It's really incredible. They made eye contact, and her gaze was demure, sincere. I have you to thank. You've never let your setbacks bring you down. You get back up and try again, and seeing that motivates me to work even harder. He smiled. I try. She was still clinging onto his shirt, like she wanted to hold his hand or his arm, but didn't have the courage to make a move. He remembered, in crisp, clear detail, how she and Rias tugged on him like he was the rope in their tug-of-war a couple of nights ago. She was always more aggressive when Rias was around. Maybe he wasn't the only one who needed to take a risk. It's like I said, this is just the start. I've still got a long way to go, but as long as I've got you on my side, nothing can stop me. Asia's cheeks flushed a deep crimson, but she never turned away. Thank you, Issei. His face was starting to heat up too. I've got your back, Asia. Promise. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a couple of onlookers staring at them with a mix of curiosity and warmth. One of them smiled when they made eye contact. Cars passed them, set on their own path, but until he looked for these distractions, he never noticed them. For a long time, he was too wrapped up in his own issues to take heed of anything outside his sphere of influence unless he consciously sought it. But things were changing bit by bit. That's when his phone buzzed, dragging him outside his head. He quickly pulled out his phone and scanned his notifications. The only message he got was from Sasuke. Come quickly. Make sure you know about Excalibur. S. Is everything all right? Asia asked. My client wants to meet up. Want me to walk you the rest of the way. It won't take that long, and I need to get my bike anyway. I don't mind. Asia surprised him by grabbing his hand, letting go of his shirt in the process. Her palm was soft and warm, but her grip was firm. No problem. He wanted to indulge. More importantly, he wanted a harem. If more than one girl liked him, who was he to refuse? After all, there was no way in hell or heaven that Asia would lead him on, and so far, he didn't need to commit or make a choice, meaning that he wasn't cheating or playing around. Just exploring his options. As they walked home, they talked about art and fell into an easy rhythm. It was good to know that Renaissance artists were so enthusiastic when making paintings of women in the nude. It was also good to know that Asia didn't mind his proclivities. Then again, she did help him perfect his signature move and enjoyed doing it. Eventually, they reached his house. Asia let go of him, smiling brightly. Please enjoy yourself, Issei. Issei smiled. For sure. The meeting itself went pretty well. Sasuke absorbed all the information he was given like a sponge. He'd been pretty affable throughout. There weren't any signs of tension on his face, but there was a very slight groove underneath his visible eye. It wasn't long before he relayed all the knowledge he had about the Excalibur. There was something fishy going on, like a puzzle piece out of place that prevented him from seeing the big picture. Now all he had to do was confirm his suspicions. Why did you want to know about the Excalibur? Most legendary weapons I know of are shrouded in myth, but the Excalibur is common knowledge. Issei shrugged. Okay, but that doesn't mean it's real, just that it's well known. Sasuke pointed at Issei's notebook. Its history is only known in the broadest of strokes, but that might be intentional. If someone is inspired to find it, their efforts would keep its legend alive, preventing it from being lost forever. Issei tilted his head, puzzled. I don't know about that. The church wants to keep the Excalibur with them, so what happens if they lose it? It's not like some random guy can find it just because he got inspired by King Arthur's stories. The church could recruit him. And if he refuses to join? I bet they'll just take it by force. That's just how it is. It wasn't how it should be. There had to be a better way for the church to keep track of the Excalibur. Then again, he didn't know everything about this situation, and if there was anything he learned from all his studying, there was always more than one side of a story. Now that he thought about it, keeping the Excalibur within the public consciousness wasn't unlike how devils kept on being urban legends. Whether it was through a Faustian bargain or even a genie in a lamp, keeping the rumor alive meant that there would always be someone who was willing to meet a devil, ensuring that a contract could always be formed. Where did you learn about the Excalibur? With a shake of his head, Issei regained his bearings. A friend helped me out. She really knows her stuff. A dumb smile spread his mouth wide, and Sasuke noticed. Are you too close? He shrugged. Kind of. Sasuke stared at him like he was expecting more, but he wouldn't get anything this time. Where are you going with this? If you like her, and you think she's important to you, then you know what you have to do. And that is what? Don't leave me hanging. A smile cracked Sasuke's facade. Romance isn't my specialty. Issei chuckled, more from frayed nerves than the humor of the situation. He had a feeling that Sasuke wasn't a ladies' man. He slummed it in a hotel room and didn't seem to go out much. It wasn't impossible that he kept himself busy and was just naturally private. He didn't know a lot about the guy, and the more time he spent with him, the more he began to think that might have been by design. I'll do my best. Do better and keep her close. It can make a difference. Time to flip the script. What, did you scare away your dream girl or something? An almost imperceptible sigh left his mouth, and he suddenly became just a bit more pensive. A bit more real. There was this classmate of mine. We weren't really friends, but she was attracted to me. We were forced to spend time together, and I grew to appreciate her strengths. She was smart, brave, and so damn annoying. Talk about whiplash. Judging from the wistful expression that flashed through Sasuke's face, being annoying wasn't an insult. But you liked her, right? Eventually. Sasuke frowned, and let the static that emerged hang in the air before it sank under the weight of its hidden implication. He suddenly felt a spark in the air, one that sent erratic jolts coursing through his body. Did you reject her or something? A nod. I had a goal to accomplish, and she tried to get involved, but I left her behind instead. When we met again, she'd grown because she wanted to stand at my side. After I reached my goal, I came to my senses, and she welcomed me back like I never left. Issei took a deep breath. He couldn't see himself falling that far, not how he was now. That friend of yours is a real keeper. The intensity in Sasuke's eye was almost frightening, but it didn't undercut the vulnerability he'd exposed, the regret hiding in plain sight. Anyone else, almost anyone else, would have abandoned me, but not her. She never gave up on me. He was finally making headway, finally learning what made Sasuke Uchiha tick. Maybe I'll get lucky enough to find a girl like that one day, Issei said more to himself. Once again, he forced himself to meet Sasuke's hawk-like gaze. Why tell me all this? Sasuke smirked. You asked? Don't make the same mistakes I did. There was the Sasuke he came to tolerate. Right. Thanks for sharing. All he got was a nod, and from the atmosphere in the room, it was clear that for all Sasuke revealed, there was a lot more that he was keeping under wraps. That was fair. He had his own secrets, too. Issei stood up and grabbed his notebook, but stopped suddenly, as a lost thought returned to him with impunity. Oh yeah, I just remembered. I spoke to Kiba earlier today. He's doing fine. A pause. Good. He analyzed every single shift in his expression, waiting, searching for a reaction, but he didn't get one. Just another poker face. And wasn't that strange? A chill swept through the streets after Issei left the hotel, clinging onto his skin like a rusted nail. It probably wouldn't get any warmer, but once he got home, he was going to eat a hot meal, continue reading Ika Ika Paradise and forget all about the cold air lingering in the night. It wasn't long until he rounded the corner closest to his house when an overwhelming sense of dread immediately gripped his heart. Goosebumps rippled across his body as a foul presence emanated around his house, like a spider's legs spreading over its prey. He could feel it in his bones. Somebody was in danger, Asia, his parents, maybe even Rias, and he wasn't there to help them. He charged to the front porch and jumped off his bike, landing at the entrance in a single bound, grateful for once that nobody was around to see him. He pulled out his key, inserted it into the slot. Just as he was about to open the door, it opened for him. Rias was there, safe, unharmed, staring at him in confusion. You're here early. Issei blew out hot air, forcing his nerves to settle. My client didn't keep me for long. Were you heading somewhere? No, I just wanted some fresh air. A small, but radiant smile blossomed on her face. Welcome back. He returned the smile. It's good to be back. Rias threw her arms around his shoulders and pulled him close, cradling his head against her chest. At first, he was too shocked to move, but in between the steady thumping of her heart, the heat emanating from her body, and the softness of her bodacious breasts, a wave of comfort washed over him. She was the buoy that protected him from the raging tempest, banishing the dread that had just taken root within his soul. Once again, she was his savior. And in time, he wrapped his arms around her waist. Rias was so warm. Almost too warm. Breathing came easy to him most of the time, but not when it was this stifling. It's hot. Your breasts. Rias chuckled. You should speak up when something's bothering you, Issei. She let go of his head, but drew her hands against her chest and began to unbutton her shirt. I really do spoil you a lot, but it can't be helped. The movement of her fingers and the agonizingly slow reveal of tantalizing, creamy flesh left him transfixed. If this was going where he thought it was, and she wasn't teasing him, he needed to be ready. That meant closing the door and making sure that Asia was. Wait, Asia was behind Rias, mouth agape, about to make a move. How could he have forgotten? He immediately made a beeline for Asia, setting his hands on her shoulders. Are you okay? Asia nodded. Her face was bright pink, but she wasn't smiling. Yes, I'm fine. A cleared throat reminded him of where he was. I'll let you two get comfortable, Rias said, steel in her voice. There's a lot you missed while you were away, but that's something that Asia can explain to you. She didn't give him a chance to respond, turning on her foot and leaving his house. Her lush red hair was like a veil, preventing him from crossing the threshold separating them and righting the wrong he made. She began to tend to his bike, and he breathed a sigh of relief. While he might have screwed up by brushing her off so quickly, he could still make amends. Maybe we should get comfortable. Then you can tell me what happened, right? Asia's smile was just what he needed to see. Right. Together, they went to the living room, and Issei sank into the couch. Asia sat next to him, pressing her hands in her lap. He idly wondered if she tried to close the gap like Akino did. Have you seen my mom or dad anywhere? Your dad's still at work, but your mom was here earlier. Asia pulled her phone out. In fact, we had a couple of visitors earlier, and one of them said she was an old friend of yours. That was news to him. He definitely would have remembered if he was childhood friends with the girl. Really? Have a look. The picture she showed him had her and two other girls smiling at the camera, although Asia's smile was somewhat strained. It was a shame those girls covered themselves in such modest robes, though, because they were smoking. The blue-haired girl had a stern countenance to her, and her gold eyes were unnervingly cold, but her soft, halting smile offset her frosty demeanor. In comparison, the girl with the twin tails had the brightest smile by far. Her chestnut brown hair was glossy in the way only years of diligent care could provide, and she had a heart-shaped face with deep purple eyes. An aching sense of familiarity struck him. He'd met her before, that much he knew, but he just couldn't remember where. Say, Asia, did you get their names? They're Irina and Zenobia. Zenobia sounded Italian, or at least European, but Irina was definitely Japanese. He was certain because he had a friend with that name. He took another look at Asia's photo and saw the uncanny resemblance between Irina and his old friend. Irina wouldn't happen to be the old friend you were talking about, right? Asia nodded, a bit too eagerly for his liking. She is. In fact, she was really looking forward to seeing you. The puzzle piece he was missing had just slotted into place and revealed the whole picture. Irina wasn't a boy, she was a girl, and a cute one at that. It was just hard to remember her because he hadn't seen Irina in so long, and his friend left when they were kids. But if they were the ones who visited, then where did that dreadful sensation come from? And why would Irina decide to drop in unannounced? It couldn't be because she wanted to see him. She came here with her friend from overseas, Asia said, answering his unsaid question. They said they were exorcists, but they didn't want to explain why they came. I wouldn't worry about that, Rias said, shirt all buttoned up. She glided into the living room from the doorway and took the seat facing them, lounging languidly with her legs crossed over one another. We'll be meeting with them after school. I'm positive they'll tell us everything we need to know. Does this have anything to do with that meeting you had? Issei asked, nonchalantly. Rias raised an eyebrow. Well, yes. The exorcists had an encounter with Sona a couple of days ago, she told me about it, and we decided to discuss it in more detail. You remember Sona, don't you? He couldn't really forget the student council president when he knew she was a devil. Sona and the rest of her council practically ran Ko Academy, and ran it like a tight ship, which really chafed at him in the past. Now that he was a devil, it was good to know that they had allies that he and the rest of his friends could rely on. Though I wonder how you knew about our meeting. Did you know about it, Asia? Asia shook her head. I expected as much. She sighed. In any case, we managed to sort out what we knew about the exorcists, their interests, and how they could affect us if they were left unchecked. While it wasn't a deep, dark secret that he was having private tutoring lessons with his master's best friend, he was relieved that Rias didn't press the issue. It wasn't something he wanted to talk about either if it would burden her or Akino in any way. Sounds like trouble, Issei said. Not if we play our cards right. We can get through this meeting without any trouble, but that means everyone has to be on the same page. The last thing we need is someone being rash to prove their point. Words to live by, but like all words, they were easier said than adhered to. Kiba was the wild card. If he stayed away, he wouldn't be a liability, but at the same time, he was one of them, and information was power. What were they like? Asia started to fiddle with the hem of her skirt, frowning deeply, unable to make eye contact. It's okay, Asia, Rias said with a warm, supportive smile. Don't be afraid. A moment passed as they waited, but Asia sat up straight and stared at him with resolute eyes. They were both nice at first. Irina was more open, but Zenobia wasn't mean, just quiet. But once your mom gave us some privacy, they started asking me questions. Issei frowned. What kind of questions? Irina asked me about you, and how you were doing, but after I answered her, Zenobia asked me about my faith. That sense of dread returned, slithering through his body and engulfing it in a tide of simmering anger itching to be ignited. Neither of them believed me when I told them my answer. Irina was surprised that a devil could still worship God, but Zenobia wanted to know what it was like. I thought she was trying to show sympathy, but I was wrong. Why is that? She offered to exorcise me so that I wouldn't have to suffer anymore. It took every single ounce of willpower he had in him to rein in his anger. The audacity that these people had to screw over Asia once again, just when she was starting to build a new life with friends who loved her for who she was instead of for what she could contribute. It was only an offer, wasn't it? Rias asked. She remained calm, eyes slightly narrowed. Yes. Zenobia said she wouldn't do anything unless I wanted it to happen. Issei shut his eyes, counted to 10, took a deep breath, tried to think of hot girls, funny stuff, anything to get his mind off this outrage. But nothing was working. Nothing at all. Asia. He opened his eyes and saw both Asia and Rias staring at him, not with hunger or longing, but mere curiosity. Yes, Issei? He took her outstretched hand and held it between his. You have nothing to worry about. Nobody is ever going to hurt you as long as I'm alive. Her eyes practically shone. Her hand clung to his like a lifeline. Oh, Issei. You're so good to me. Issei almost smiled. Flattery usually went pretty far to win him over, especially when it was sincere, but he was too pissed off for it to register. The same goes for me, Asia, Rias said. She didn't elaborate, but she didn't need to. She was their master. Thank you, Rias, Asia said, but while the gratitude in her voice was genuine, she hadn't stopped looking at him for a second. He pulled away from Asia's alluring gaze to steal a glance at Rias, and saw her tapping a finger on her thigh, staring away from them with a forlorn expression. Considering what was happening right in front of her, it wasn't that surprising. Clueless, that's what he was. For anyone else, getting fawned over by 3 amazing girls would be a dream come true, but they were dreams for a reason. Stuff like this didn't happen to a guy like him. And as much as he liked to indulge, it was starting to build up a cost he wasn't sure he could pay. Ugh, now wasn't the time to think about his lack of a love life. Right now, he had a meeting to look forward to, involving a childhood friend and an exorcist with a warped sense of mercy. No matter how cute they were, he couldn't let himself forget what they did. Ria's warning rang in his mind, and for her sake, he'd try not to provoke them, but one way or another. He wasn't going to let their injustice stand. Even though Issei and his allies had the numbers, the exorcists held the advantage. Their Excaliburs weren't just swords from fables, they were the real deal, and the way Irina skillfully changed her weapon's shape set his pulse on fire. If they had posed with their swords in Asia's picture, he probably would have been turned off right from the start. It was sobering just how close he was to losing Asia again, but that nightmare hadn't come to pass. Funny, how things worked out sometimes. Irina and Zenobia weren't ordinary tourists, they were hunters seeking their quarry. 3 Excalibur fragments had been stolen from the church by fallen angels, and Irina and Zenobia were tasked to retrieve them. Normally, that would be all he needed to hear, except it wasn't that simple. Nothing in this godforsaken world was. We would prefer if you gave us free rein to search for the lost swords, Zenobia said. I have no interest in letting a single Excalibur remain in my territory, Rias replied. If we all work together, we'd cover more ground and find them sooner. Then what would stop you from destroying them? You'll have to forgive my skepticism, but it's hard to assume a devil would let us retrieve even 1 holy sword, let alone 3. It's more likely that you'd support the fallen angels' attempts to eliminate us. Rias scoffed. I'd appreciate it if you didn't make baseless assumptions. Raw energy thrummed from his master's body, twitching with the restraint of a lion assured of its dominance. Issei couldn't detect a trace of her abundant warmth, only her infamous power of destruction. With that kind of power at her disposal, she didn't need her peerage watching her back. Unfortunately, either exorcist was intimidated. If you did, we'd have no choice but to eliminate you. Of course, I doubt you would in the first place. It wouldn't be a good look if the current Lucifer's younger sister was seen consorting with the enemy. Perhaps, but my brother would understand. I would never besmirch his name to sate my pride. Zenobia smiled. I never expected you to. Forgive me for any rudeness, I was merely relaying the church's current stance. I would hate for any unnecessary conflict to arise between us. Keyword being unnecessary. All it would take was one excuse. Rias inhaled, then exhaled, allowing the energy in the air to dissipate. The feeling is mutual. In any case, you know where I stand. Considering how you treated one of my dear comrades, I'd say the offer I gave you was quite generous. Rather than respond, Zenobia turned to Irina, who gave her a nod. We'll consider it, to commemorate your hospitality. However, should we refuse, I promise not to interfere in your affairs, provided that you grant us the space to complete our mission. It was a testament to Ria's fortitude that she hadn't just held her own, she led the conversation from the beginning. This back and forth wasn't the easiest thing to follow, but even he noticed how Zenobia hadn't promised that Irina wouldn't interfere. I can accept those terms. As one, the exorcists stood, taking their weapons with them. Before you go, is there anything else you'd like? Some tea, perhaps? No, thank you. We'll let ourselves out. Irina gave a slight bow of her head and departed, Zenobia almost shadowing her. Before either of them actually left, Zenobia fixed her piercing gaze on Asia. Have you considered my offer, Asia Argento? Asia began to shiver, staring at her hands then her feet, anywhere but the exorcists in front of her. This was his only chance. Back off, Issei shouted. I heard everything you told Asia, and the answer's no. Zenobia faced him, but he was more than ready to match her. I believe that's Asia's choice to make. Normally, a heretic wouldn't get to choose, but... Where do you get off on calling Asia a heretic? She smiled, the kind of mocking smile he couldn't stand. Asia was banished for healing a devil. Not only that, she had the audacity to become a devil herself. That makes her a heretic. He took a step forward, but Kaneko arrested his movement with one arm. You're not helping. Relax. Rias was watching him, and so was Aquino. He wouldn't go in half-cocked. But damn it, he couldn't give them an excuse to walk all over Asia. He wouldn't let their injustice stand. Call Asia whatever you want, but she still has more faith in one finger than both of you have in your entire bodies. He thrust his right arm in front of Asia, shielding her. Banishing her was the worst mistake your bosses ever made. Irina smiled at him, but he couldn't see it as anything other than a mockery. But Issei, wouldn't that make things harder for Asia? Now she chose to spoke. Irina seemed content to let Zenobia take the lead during the meeting, but she was so chatty when they visited his home. It had to have been planned, since she was still cheerful in this overbearing atmosphere. What are you talking about? Think about it from her perspective. Against all the odds, Asia still believes in our God, but since she's a devil now, it's impossible for her to pray or read the Bible without going through unimaginable pain. Issei scowled. His left arm itched, aching to be released. He knew, all too well, just how much Asia had suffered. And whose fault is that? Asia never asked for any of this. Zenobia strode towards Asia, stopping about as far as the length of her Excalibur. Did you know that Asia was once a holy maiden? She was a true miracle worker, beloved by her people, and was practically a saint before she fell. I thought she'd fallen victim to insurmountable pressure and lost her way, but she proved me wrong. What did you expect? Not much, I'll admit. However, in spite of her heresy, she never let the ensuing hardship break her, and even as a devil, her faith in God endures. She placed a hand on the hilt of her holy sword. That is why she deserves freedom from this cursed life, and it's also why she deserves the chance to choose. He still shook from sheer rage. Zenobia might have felt bad for Asia, but Asia's life was still in danger. There was no way in heaven or hell that he'd ever lose her. Enough, Rias said, taking a literal stand. You've made your intentions towards Asia very clear. I won't stand here and let you humiliate my friend any longer. We don't want to shame her, Irina said. I can't speak for Zenobia, but I want to help Asia any way that I can. Rias crossed her arms. You've said more than enough. Zenobia shook her head. Both of you are so focused on protecting Asia that you've forgotten to let her stand on her own 2 feet. In that moment, fear extinguished his anger. Would he just let Zenobia exorcise Asia if Asia chose to die? Would he just stand aside and let Asia die if it meant that she wouldn't have to suffer any longer? It wasn't his choice, but if he didn't protect her, if he failed her again, if he saved her against her wishes, and she resented him, even just a little, if he took a risk and let himself get screwed over for thinking that he was worth more than nothing. He really didn't know what to do. All he had was this cloying anger that threatened to burn everything else to ash, and by letting it fester overnight, it had grown into something he could barely control. I want to live. Her answer was like a shot through the heart. Asia stared straight ahead, and while tears fell down her face, he could see the strength in her frame, the conviction he admired so much. It was exactly what he needed to hear. Zenobia, on the other hand, was frowning, listless and pensive. Her fingers lifted off the Excalibur's hilt one by one, before tightening all at once. I can't guarantee your salvation, but... Issei tore past Kaneko and filled the gap between Asia and Zenobia. She said no? Now get out of here before I make you. Issei, please. Stay out of this, he growled, a vicious dragon who'd just been provoked. This is between me and her. It has nothing to do with you. Excuse me? You heard me. Issei's glare flickered to the person who dared to interfere, and it took all the willpower he had left to stay focused. Damn. Of all the people in this room, why did it have to be her? Asia really means a lot to you, doesn't she? Irina said. Fortunately for her, though, she wasn't smiling. She's more than just a friend. Hot tears threatened to spill from his eyes. If either of you hurt even one hair on Asia's head, I'll spend every waking moment making sure that you regret it. If you attack us, that makes you an enemy of the church, Zenobia said. I don't give a shit. I'll take all of you on if I have to. A smirk enveloped her features. You might be the Red Dragon Emperor, but that's still big talk coming from just one man. Are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? Issei, stand down. It was Rias, this time, who reminded him where he was. He let himself look at Asia. The pride in her eyes and her warm smile reminded him that he was fighting for her sake, not his. Sorry, he said. Asia touched his arm. Don't worry, I understand. He won't be alone. It couldn't be. Issei immediately turned and saw Kiba leaning against the door, looking like he'd never left. The only thing out of place was his disheveled school shirt. And who are you? Zenobia asked. I'm your superior. At any other moment, Issei would have assumed Kiba was just trying to look cool, but there was an edge to the guy that deeply disturbed him. And will you fight us as well? Kiba stood upright, taking a slow walk to where Zenobia was standing. He never blinked, and the only thing on his face was a fierce smirk. Fight you? No, I'm going to kill you. Issei didn't expect to be participating in an impromptu tag match, but it was Ria's idea to let him and Kiba vent their anger through a spar. The real surprise wasn't that she was willing to let them fight, but that she got Kiba to listen. That meant they had to leave the old school building. Sunset was about to arrive, bathing the area in a warm orange glow. The clearing they were in had a lot of room to move around in, littered with tall trees and lots of foliage. To top it all off, the barrier Aquino set up would keep potential bystanders from getting in the way. Rias had made one thing very, very clear: no killing or maiming whatsoever. Other than that, they could do whatever they wanted. Once they were settled, Irina and Zenobia discarded their robes, revealing skin-tight black leotards, gloves that cut off at the bicep, and high-rise combat boots. While Zenobia's shoulders were covered in armor, Irina's were left bare. However, while Zenobia's leotard cut off just above her thighs, Irina's was a bit more conservative, the bottoms looking more like shorts. Those outfits were better than what he imagined they were hiding, but it wasn't the time to ogle them. Irina had shaped her Excalibur into a katana with a brown hilt and gold pommel. Deceptively simple, but he could feel the holy power emanating from the Excalibur of mimicry. Zenobia's Excalibur of Destruction was a great sword, a blue blade flanked by 2 sharp steel edges, lined with a red strip that split into 3 points on both sides. It funneled into an axe cross-guard that had 2 grips. One was wreathed by chains that connected it to the blade, and Zenobia held the other grip, set in gold. It definitely wasn't going to be a picnic, but this was his best chance to prove how far he was willing to go. Kiba, on the other hand, broke into haunting laughter. Have you gone mad? Zenobia asked. I spent days looking for the Excalibur, and now, 2 of them appear willingly before my very eyes. Sometimes I just can't believe my luck. He held out his hand, summoning a thin katana. No frills about it, just steel and a dark blue hilt. Something about it was strangely familiar. Sword birth, huh? You must be that boy who... Zenobia was silenced, forced to fend off Kiba's strike. It looked like he had his own agenda. Not that he could really expect anything else. Issei, it really is you! Irina shouted. Stars were in her eyes. Seeing you like this is the last thing I would have ever expected. To think that my old friend became a devil. He'd revealed his boosted gear before the battle began, stocking 2 boosts so far with more to follow. No harm done in being prepared. Still, duty calls, so in the name of God I'll punish you. Well, damn. Irina came after him with a stunning amount of speed, springing into the air. He was just barely able to avoid her overhead strike, but his shirt paid for it. What the hell was that for? Irina stood up and held a hand at her mouth. Her cheeks were a dark pink, and he almost swore he heard her moan. I really don't want to hurt you, but it wouldn't be fair to either of us if I held back. So you'd better come at me with everything you've got. What in the world did he get himself into? Irina had definitely gotten a lot stranger since they last met. Then again, he wasn't a bastion of sanity himself. Kiba seemed to be doing better than he was, though, coming in from multiple angles and keeping Zenobia guessing with some fast footwork. She was holding her own, but with a holy sword, all she needed was one good hit, and Kiba was toast. What made it worse was that if a devil was killed by a holy sword, they didn't just die, they were erased from existence. Gone. As he found out, using his gauntlet to block Irina's attack didn't actually hurt that much. Still, she was fast, and one hit knocked him off balance, meaning that she wasn't frail. Looks like you have some tricks up your sleeve. Not bad, Issei. 4 boosts now. He held his arm aloft, pointing a sharp talon at his childhood friend. Get used to it, 'cause there's a lot more where that came from. I'm gonna hit you where it hurts. Irina could beat him with 1 good hit, but 2 could play at that game. Once he touched her, they'd form a connection, and with a snap of his fingers he'd rip that leotard off and get a chance to worship her hot bod. That, and Irina would be too embarrassed to keep on fighting. In spite of himself, he began to grin. Ah, dress break, he was so glad he invented it. What's with that face? Irina asked, frowning in disgust. Watch out, Kaneko said. She was standing with the other girls, close enough that they could intervene if things got rough. He'll blow off all your clothing if you let him touch you. Issei flinched, staggering backwards. What the hell, Kaneko? Irina's my enemy. Kaneko frowned, clearly unimpressed. And you're the enemy to women everywhere. He would have let his shoulders drop, but he was still in a fight. Man, you can be really heartless sometimes. Irina's disappointment was so overbearing that he almost felt guilty for being a pervert. It isn't enough that you became a devil, your heart is filled with depraved lust. You've given me no choice but to purify you of your wickedness. Preach, Kaneko said. When he made eye contact with her, she shrugged. What? You've still got a chance. Use your brain and figure something out. Encouragement from Kaneko of all people wasn't something he'd take lightly. Besides, she had a point. By using his lower head to think, he'd almost lost sight of why he was involved in this battle. Asia smiled at him in support, but he couldn't bring himself to look at Akino, not after how he screamed at her. Hey Prez, can I get your permission to promote? A moment passed. Then, she nodded. Permission granted. Just don't take things too far. While Rias did say he had free rein to do what he wanted, it was still good to make sure he wasn't overstepping his bounds, explicit or implicit. Thanks. Kiba had swapped his katana for swords of ice and fire and charged at Zenobia with reckless abandon, but she rewarded him by crushing his swords with 1 strike. She didn't stop there, slamming her Excalibur into the ground, tip first. A massive crater formed from the impact, and while Kiba was lucky to escape, Irina was knocked off her feet. Dirt flew in all directions, nearly entering his mouth. Now this is the real power of destruction, Zenobia said. I resent that, Rias said. Kiba chuckled. Just what I'd expect from an Excalibur. It doesn't matter if it's 1, 3 or 7, I will destroy them all. That wasn't how he'd react to nearly being caved in, and it wasn't the reaction he'd expect from anyone sane. Still, he could understand on some level. The rush of excitement from witnessing such an incredible feat was truly something to behold. 6 boosts. It was time. Any further and he might not be able to contain his power. Explosion! A gold sigil formed underneath his red gauntlet's green jewel. Green energy erupted from his body, the product of all his boosts unleashing a wellspring of power. Good thing, too, since Irina had climbed back to her feet. Zenobia, she said, pouting. Watch where you swing that thing. Then she turned her attention back to him, but avoiding her was a lot easier. Thanks to his boosted gear, his reactions, reflexes, strength, speed, stamina, durability, and overall aptitude had been multiplied by 6. It turned their uneven spar into a dance between equals as he whirled around her flurry of sweeping slashes and glancing thrusts, searching for an opening. He had to give her credit, she was maintaining a lot of focus for someone who wanted to punish him. Once again, Irina leaped into the air, but when she came down, it was with an axe, not a katana, and it came down with the force of a falling comet. Such a shame that he got out of the way, but he wasn't in the mood to get crushed. Now that she finally transformed her Excalibur, it was time to pull something out of his hat. As soon as Irina pulled out her axe, he fired a ball of red energy at her. Using the dragon shot was risky, but the shot he fired wasn't even close to what he could truly unleash. Unfortunately, she didn't even try to tank the hit. Instead, she swerved out of the way with a butterfly twist, of all things. His blast exploded, but she was still unharmed. At least he knew what she could handle. That was a close one, Irina said. You're full of surprises, aren't you? He couldn't let himself forget that Irina was just as willing to kill Asia as Zenobia was, that she could easily turn his sword against him in a real battle and he'd have no choice but to fight for his life. At the same time, he couldn't forget that Irina was also the childhood friend that he used to play hero with. Man, was it hard to hold on to this anger. It sucks that we have to fight, Issei said. Irina smiled, and he was swamped with a wave of nostalgia. I always thought that you'd be normal. Different, sure, but still normal. I still can't believe that was how we reunited. Issei smiled. Me too. A moment of camaraderie between two enemies was something he'd rarely get to savor. Doubly so when it was a reunion between two old friends. He'd seen how both of them fought, and if he played it safe, he had a fairly good chance of not washing out completely. That said, he knew where his fight was, and it wasn't with Irina. Kiba! He shouted, grabbing his friend's attention. Let's swap. Initially, he didn't expect Kiba to listen, but Kiba backed away from Zenobia and made a tactical retreat. Issei didn't think that either exorcist would give them much time to talk, so he'd have to make the most of it. You looked like you were struggling there, Issei said, as soon as he caught up. Kiba frowned. I was testing her. Now I know how to win. Really? You sure it's fine that I fight your opponent then? He dismissed the white sword in his hand. As long as I get to destroy the Excalibur, I don't care who I have to fight. Issei smiled. Don't forget what the president said. I won't. Kiba stared at him, unblinking, almost like he was making an internal decision. Don't get distracted. She's tough, but if you keep her on her toes, you'll do fine. Then he dashed towards Irina, brandishing the same katana he'd formed at the beginning of their fight. Lightning crackled against the steel blade. Promotion to Rook, Issei said, taking advantage of his status as a lowly pawn. By promoting, he could take on the attributes of any other chess piece other than the king. Since Zenobia fought with strength rather than speed, it was only fitting that he took Kaniko's advice and matched her, harnessing the Rook's increased strength and durability. I've been waiting for this, Zenobia said, pointing her Excalibur at him. It isn't every day that I get to test myself against the Red Dragon Emperor. Issei scowled. It was a lot easier to see Zenobia as an enemy instead of a human being. It was also a lot easier to focus his anger now that he had a suitable target. This was the only chance he'd get to set her straight without suffering any consequences. Zenobia moved with deceptive agility, but he caught her holy sword with his gauntlet, and it didn't hurt a bit. He slugged her mouth as hard as he could, and hit her a couple more times for good measure. I told you you'd regret it. Since he kept his grip firm and she did the same, Zenobia didn't fall, but blood leaked from a split lip, and she spat out more blood. Then she shoved her knee into his stomach. It wasn't hard enough to really hurt him, but it did loosen his hold on the Excalibur. You were saying? Zenobia tried to stab his sternum, but he parried it with his gauntlet and jumped 20 meters away, ignoring the ache on his arm. She was really strong, and she wasn't willing to let him breathe, catching up to him in seconds. With her Excalibur's long reach, it was hard to close in and land another punch. Dress break was out of the question, too. On top of that, he had to keep her from hitting him, which was easier said than done. She wasn't just stronger, she was more skilled, and it was only because of his boosts that she hadn't punished his meager combat ability. The pressure was starting to mount, and he was just barely able to avoid a powerful strike that smashed the ground below. It did give him an opportunity, and when she arrived, he punched straight ahead and grazed her stomach, taking advantage of the wide gap she left just before hitting a full swing. Unfortunately, she was able to use her newfound momentum to catch herself and transition into a graceful backflip. Promotion to knight. Now, he was speed, fast as the wind. With the pace of the knight, he was able to catch Zenobia and kick her kidneys just after she landed, making her stumble. He meant to whip her off her feet, but it was better than nothing. He flashed in front of her and hit her nose with an uppercut, rather than her jaw, but it exposed her. Promotion to rook. He got into position and released all the power he'd amassed through his gauntlet in one single attack. His aim was true, and he felt a shockwave burst from his fist, but he didn't connect. Instead, an axe was buried in his gut. Impressive, she said, retracting her holy sword with impunity. He coughed violently and fell to one knee, phlegm mixed with blood flying out of his mouth. She hadn't even cut him, but he'd already reached his breaking point. Somehow, Zenobia had slipped into his guard and punished his recklessness. He dared to look at her and found her seething in fury, blood leaking from her nose. You almost had me, but almost isn't good enough. You let your ego get the best of you. Zenobia hefted her Excalibur on her shoulder and turned her back on him. Better luck next time, Issei Hayadu. It couldn't end like this, not with one move. Not while he still breathed. Almost wasn't enough, but Zenobia hadn't dealt the finishing blow, and he could still fight. He still had a chance. Fortunately, Kiba seemed to be doing okay. He refused to give Irina an inch. Every strike he made with his lightning blade was aimed at Irina's holy sword, and he could see cracks and spiderweb faults lining its edges. Kiba readied a horizontal slash, but Irina backflipped over his strike and kicked his chin at the apex of her jump. That one move was enough to turn the tide of the battle, and when Irina shifted her katana into a dagger, Kiba was put on the defensive. He was fast enough to avoid getting hurt, but not strong enough to overwhelm Irina, who hadn't lost a step. To make matters worse, Zenobia was just about to arrive. Need some help, Irina? Thanks, but I can handle this. Irina swiped her dagger at Kiba's sword-wielding arm, quickly changing course to stab his ribcage. Kiba was up to the challenge, blocking her with a dagger of his own. He thrust his foot into Irina's stomach and pushed her away, tossing his dagger and forcing her to prevent her eye from getting gouged. All that did was clip a few strands from her hair. However, it was enough to make her back off. Zenobia clearly planned to join the fight, but dozens of swords erupted all around her, separating her and Irina from Kiba. Zenobia destroyed most of the swords, while Irina transformed her dagger into a great sword just as large as Zenobia's and followed suit. The cracks still remained. It wasn't much of a deterrent, but it did buy Kiba enough time to join Issei. Cuts both big and small sliced up his shirt and his breathing was heavier than before, but he wasn't bleeding and he still held his lightning katana in his right hand. Can you still fight? Issei stood up, dusting himself off and wiping his mouth. Of course I can. He'd saved his most powerful move for last, and while he'd have to regain his boosts, it was better than the alternative. Can you keep them busy? If I can get a good shot, I think I can knock them out. Kiba closed his eyes before nodding. I'll help you, but you only get one chance. That's all I need. One moment, Kiba was with him, and the next, he was a stone's throw away from Zenobia and Irina. More swords emerged from underground, and he created more as soon they were destroyed, running away each time Irina closed the gap. Devil wings sprouted from Issei's back. While he couldn't fly, he could definitely jump good and hang in the air for a few seconds. He'd stockpiled about 6 boosts, but while he'd like the full 12 to hit them at maximum power, 6 would have to do. Promotion to Queen, he whispered, not willing to let Irina or Zenobia in on his surprise. The Queen represented the pinnacle of his potential, combining the abilities of the knight, the rook, and the magical power of the bishop. Kiba! Get back! Kiba did so, but not before surrounding the exorcists in a ring of swords, crisscrossed by more swords. Irina! Zenobia shouted. Be careful! Irina transformed her great sword into a whip that sheared through Kiba's swords with impetuous ease. Not that it mattered. He'd gone airborne and poured his remaining strength into a sphere of bright red energy. For a moment, he saw his opponents, his so-called enemies. They were tiny from so high above, and it made him wonder if it was worth going this far. Then he saw Zenobia closing in on Kiba and Irina come in from the other side, further away. His friend was running out of time. Time to choose. Issei aimed at Zenobia and punched the sphere, unleashing the dragon shot as a beam that could shatter mountains at full strength. This beam was substantially weaker, but it wasn't weak, crossing the battlefield in milliseconds. Irina moved in the way of the beam, holding a shield aloft and preventing it from hitting Zenobia. Her shield began to splinter from the onslaught, but Zenobia joined her and hit the beam with her Excalibur. The impact made the ground below them crack, forming a crater that deepened with every ticking second. Somehow, they held the line. Their combined effort wasn't enough to stop the beam. It shouldn't have been enough, and they were definitely losing ground, but a pair of barriers, crimson and electric yellow, appeared right in front of them, holding steady as the energy beam ran out of power and dissipated. Their Excaliburs were damaged, and Irina's was on the verge of breaking, but they could still stand. And that meant they could still fight. A thin blade erupted through Zenovia's chest, so close to her heart that Issei wasn't sure if she dodged or Kiba missed. The shuddering gasp of breath she took didn't clear things up for him. Kiba pulled out the blade and took a step back, about to finish the job, but Zenovia didn't fall. She roared, spinning around and destroying the crimson barrier that appeared, shattering Kiba's katana and slicing his chest from crotch to chin. Both of them collapsed. Issei landed, about to harness the power of the night, but Irina had already moved around the electric yellow barrier that shielded him and sliced his torso right where Zenovia had hit him. Excruciating pain exploded throughout his body. His knees buckled and he fell face first, but before he hit the earth, he saw Irina's clenched teeth bared in a nightmarish scowl. It wasn't a good look, not for someone so bright. Then he saw her purple eyes fill with sorrow. "Sorry," he said. "I'm sorry, too," he thought she said, but he couldn't tell. It was all too much to bear. "You're awake," Ria said. Issei sat up, clutching his forehead. A migraine thumped against his brain like brass bars, bleeding together with the phantom pain flickering just above his belly button. His favorite red shirt had been cut, but there wasn't any scar or bruise beneath it. Night had fallen, and the only lights came from the moon's hazy glow and a set of lit candles inside the club room. "Please, don't stress yourself," Asia said. Her hands lingered above Kiba's chest, nestled in shining green light. "Thank goodness, he was still alive. I healed your injuries, but you need to rest. If you were cut any deeper, you would have been seriously hurt." Was that right? It all happened so quickly that he could barely register how badly he'd been wounded. "Consider yourself fortunate," Ria said. She was busy running her fingers through Kiba's blonde hair. The lucky bastard had his head in Ria's lap. Neither of them landed fatal blows. If that was the case, then he really was one lucky guy. Kiba was even luckier. Just then, he felt someone massage his shoulders. The way they did it was quick and rough, but it went a long way in soothing his aches and pains. "You did pretty well out there," Kaneko said. "With a bit more experience, you might have won." A smile crossed his face. "Gee, thanks. You know, your advice really helped." "That's what advice is for." She clapped his shoulder. "Keep it up. One day, you might be more than a perverted freak." And there it was. It was stuff like that that made him want to double down. There wasn't anything wrong with a healthy appreciation of the female body, as long as no one was harmed. "You really were incredible," Issei, Asia said. She had just finished healing Kiba and began to take off his bandages. Blood-stained bandages. It left him uncomfortably bare, but it couldn't be helped. Hearing her say all that made him grin. "If anyone wants to hurt you, they'll have to get through me first." Asia blushed yet again. "I don't want you to get hurt for my sake." "He won't have to," Ria said. "I'll admit you did better than I expected, but you let your vendetta cloud your judgment. You were participating in a spar, not a fight to the death." Issei frowned. "I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna apologize for trying to keep Asia safe." She sighed. "You don't have to, but there's a time and place for excessive force, and this wasn't it. Every choice you make affects someone, Issei, no matter how small that choice might be. Never forget that." There was truth to what Rias was saying, but the last time Asia was in real danger, he was the only one who tried to save her. It didn't matter if she wasn't one of them at the time, she was still his friend, and he knew what it was like to be scared and powerless. The last thing he wanted to do was to stand around and do nothing while Asia or anyone else he knew suffered in solitude. Besides, protecting Asia isn't something you have to do on your own. Kiba's eyes shot wide at that moment, and he immediately clutched his stomach. Thanks to Asia's twilight healing, no one would ever know he'd been sliced and diced by a holy sword, but it probably wouldn't do much for the nasty scar on his right bicep. What happened? You lost, Kaneko said. Wordlessly, she handed him a spare school shirt. His last shirt was beyond repair. Kiba uttered a quiet thanks before putting it on. Now, Issei could actually look at the guy. That's an understatement, Ria said. If you'd been cut any deeper, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. You're lucky to be alive. Kiba scoffed, but before he could say anything, Issei beat him to the punch. What about Zenobia? She's alive, but just barely. We have Asia to thank for that. Everyone's attention turned to Asia, and Issei wasn't surprised when she recoiled. Why did you heal her? Kiba asked. Asia took a deep breath. She wasn't our enemy, and if she died, her superiors would come after you. Kiba scowled. If she tries to kill you after you showed her mercy, then don't act surprised. I couldn't leave her. She faced Kiba and her green eyes blazed with conviction. That's not who I am. Considering what Zenobia threatened to do, choosing to heal her had to have been a difficult decision. The fact she had to choose at all was pretty messed up. I appreciate you trying to help, but you don't have to worry about me. Asia frowned. But I do worry. That's what friends are for, right? What happened after Zenobia was healed? Issei asked, trying to change the subject. There was no need for Asia to get caught in Kiba's crosshairs. We found out who was responsible for stealing the church's stock of Excaliburs, Ria said. It was Kokabeel, of the Grigori. What's the Grigori? They're a special group of fallen angels, Aquino said. He nearly jumped out of his seat. There was no reason why Aquino wouldn't be here, yet subconsciously or otherwise, he hadn't bothered to look for her. A pair of hands settled on his shoulders, tipped with trimmed fingernails. When he looked up at her, she greeted him with a smile. A small one, but it was more than he deserved. They're said to be those who watch over the children of God, and were once tasked to guide humanity in various ways. Kokabeel isn't just one of their leaders, he's also a veteran of the Great War. Before he fell, Kokabeel was known as the Star of God, with all the power that lofty title implies. Well put, Ria said, her eyes flickering between him and Aquino. She pressed her fingers together. If Kokabeel truly is involved, it can only mean he has something nefarious planned. Meanwhile, Kiba had taken a proper seat on the couch. Where did the exorcists go? Off searching for Kokabeel, I'd wager. Did you try to stop them? Issei asked. Ria shook her head. They weren't willing to budge. It doesn't help that one of their allies was killed in action, a priest who'd been sent here on reconnaissance duty. Since Irina volunteered some valuable information and was willing to abide by the terms I set, I let them go. It wasn't the wrong call, but any trepidation he had was due to their fight. Asia was safe and sound, and he made sure they got his message. Now all he could think about was how Irina planned to fight someone as dangerous as Kokabeel. It was almost reckless, what with Zenobia in critical condition. Fallen angels were almost always bad news, but someone who led them had to be 100 times worse. I know who killed that priest, Kiba said. It was Fried Selzen. That stray exorcist? Rias asked. The very same. Issei's eyes flitted between Kiba and Asia as unwanted reminders surged through his mind. If that piece of crap was involved, then things just got a whole lot messier. I happened to come across him when he died, and Fried was there, wielding an Excalibur of his own. An intense, focused glare darkened Kiba's face. He won't be a problem anymore. At first, he couldn't believe what Kiba had just said, but the sense of finality in his tone said it all. Good riddance, Aquino said, the distaste in her voice crystal clear. Word, Kaneko said. It was hard to disagree. Aquino's disdain was totally justified. Fried tried to hit on her once, and the way that he treated her like a piece of meat, and nothing else, made him nauseous. He wasn't the type to dance over people's graves, but he definitely wasn't going to miss Fried. At the same time, there was something awfully cold-blooded about this whole affair. I don't disagree, Rias said, but if Fried was working for Kokabeel, then what you did might have repercussions. I'm aware of that, Kiba said. Then why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to burden you. Coming from him, the words rung hollow. Nothing you do can ever burden me. I'll always be here to help you. Kiba's frown softened, and in the ensuing silence, Issei let himself believe that Kiba might have considered Rias's offer, that nearly getting killed would have knocked some sense into the guy. You just get in the way. But he couldn't fall victim to delusion. Rias flinched. When Issei opened his mouth to interject, she held up a finger, stopping him in his tracks. Do you really think that, or are you just trying to act tough? Kiba glared at Rias. It's the truth. If you hadn't blocked Issei's attack, their swords would have been destroyed. Then I wouldn't have had to take those measures. Is that what you call it? Rias closed her eyes. You're above senseless murder, and I refuse to let you make a mistake you'll regret. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that the Excalibur is nothing more than a folk tale, and if I have to kill anyone who gets in my way, then that's something I'll never regret. And then what? Do you think that Kokubile is going to let you destroy the Excaliburs he stole? If you face him, you will die. Kiba's right hand clenched into a tight fist. The silence was stifling, chafing at Issei in a way he'd never truly felt. He wanted to keep the peace, but he couldn't screw things up. So all he could do was watch, and wait for someone else to make a move. After what felt like eternity, Kiba stood, and walked towards the door. Where do you think you're going? Rias asked, standing up and following him. They stopped right at the room's exit. I won't let you leave me, Kiba. You're my knight, and you're a part of our family. Did you forget all of that in your haste to get revenge? No, I didn't. I just remembered who I am. Kiba's hand hovered over the door handle. I hope you realize what will happen if you abandon us. I know, Rias, and I'm sorry. He opened the door and walked out, never looking back. He left, Asia said, dumbfounded as he was. Rias was like a statue in front of that door. Oh, Kiba, she whispered, and the pain in her voice made his heart ache for her. Is it fine to let him leave like that? Kaneko asked in an unusually soft voice, frowning deeply. I'll go talk to him, Issei said. No response. He stood up, but before he could take even one step, Akino grabbed his wrist. Don't lose your temper. Her violet eyes were piercing, a soul-crushing reminder of what he needed to fix. I won't. She let go, and he moved with purpose. Once he reached Rias, he gave her the widest, brightest smile he could muster. Just leave it to me, okay? Rias' lip quivered. She gave the slightest of nods, which he took as permission. However, before he could depart, he heard her inhale deeply. Issei, don't try to bring Kiba back. He grimaced. You sure? I'm not. But if he's forced to return, it'll only make him resentful and desperate. Issei nodded. You're the boss. The night sky was clear, filled with flickering stars. Kiba lingered around the clearing, crouching over one of the craters and scooping up some of the dirt. It passed through his fingers, catching a breeze and floating away. We really got our asses handed to us, huh? Issei said, a smile on his face. Kiba stood up, dusted off his hands, and stared straight at him. Did Rias send you? His expression was just as eerie as it was when he showed him that holy sword picture. If he never did that, then no, he couldn't blame himself. Kiba would have been set off as soon as he saw Irina and Zenovia's holy swords. Nah. I wanted to talk to you myself. He breathed in the night air, letting it out in a slow exhale. I won't stop you. Why did you try to kill Zenovia? I saw an opportunity and I took it. I'm surprised you care at all. Issei shrugged, to pretend that he really didn't care that Kiba had gone this far this quickly. I thought you were going after the Excalibur. I didn't think you had to kill people to destroy a few swords. Kiba frowned. I was, but I'm not going to pretend that people aren't going to get hurt in the process. But killing people? I get that Fried's a scumbag, and Zenovia's an enemy, but what about if you tried to kill someone innocent? What then? Kiba sighed, and for a moment the facade crumbled. If someone has an Excalibur and they refuse to give it up, then they're my enemy. No exceptions. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't like you. A scowl lit up Kiba's face, turning the coldness of his glare into searing heat. You don't know a single thing about me. Issei winced, not just from the sudden flash of anger, but from the truth in Kiba's words. Yet rather than retreat, he faced Kiba head-on. Yeah, I don't know much about you, not as much as I should, but the president's right, you're above senseless murder. Kiba shook his head. An awkward silence ensued, though the awkwardness was mostly on Issei's end. He was missing the point. He wasn't trying to bring Kiba back, he was trying to understand why Kiba would leave in the first place. Let me ask you something. Issei blinked. Was Kiba trying to change the subject? Okay, go ahead. Do you know a man named Sasuke? His heart skipped a beat. Yeah. He's my client. Something in him clicked, but he wasn't sure how this was connected. Not yet, anyway. How did you guys meet? He helped me fight Freed. A wry smile pulled at the side of his lip. I wouldn't have been able to kill him otherwise. He snorted. So Sasuke could fight too? It explained why he was so intimidating, but being intimidating didn't mean he could fight. That's all he did, right? He gave me some advice. He told me not to do this alone. Issei clenched his hands into fists. Then why are you running away? No, he wouldn't piss Kiba off. He willed himself to stay calm. It was easier to douse his anger now and let it go, because time, distance, and assurance made it easier to cool lingering embers. Help me understand, Kiba. I get that you want revenge, but you don't have to hurt the president to do it. Believe me, that wasn't my intention. He closed his mouth, frowning. I couldn't think of any other way to stop her. That was hard to believe, coming from a smart guy like Kiba. You didn't think about asking her for help? I can't. She has restrictions and responsibilities she has to obey that would keep her from helping me. So what? She'd still try her best. Kiba looked at him, and for the first time, Issei saw the profound sadness in his blue eyes. Rias cares about me like I'm her own flesh and blood, and I care about her too deeply to let her get punished or hurt for my sake. Do you even hear yourself? He wanted to say it, call him out for being selfish and inconsiderate, but he couldn't. It wasn't because Kiba was right, it was because he used the same excuse on a smaller scale. So you won't risk burdening her, if it means that she doesn't have to worry, right? It's the least you can do because she saved your life and brought you up from nothing. Kiba nodded. That's right. The two of them just stood there, letting the moment sink in, and Issei let his worries settle beneath the surface of his conscious mind. Why did you tell Sasuke about me? Issei rubbed the back of his neck. I just needed to talk about it, I guess. I never expected him to track you down. Kiba stared at him again, but it was pensive, not eerie or intimidating or heartrending. In a way, I'm glad you did. He couldn't really say the same. Just don't go in there half-cocked, alright? Kiba just gave him another wry smile. I won't. A summoning circle appeared on top of the crater. I can't expect to cheat death a third time, after all. He stepped into the circle and left, consumed by crimson light. It should have been obvious that Freed couldn't have obtained an Excalibur alone, even for someone who barely knew anything about the supernatural, but why would Sasuke get involved at all? He had a strange fixation on revenge, but that didn't mean much. Even if he could fight, that didn't guarantee he could survive. Why he would risk so much for a mere stranger, he didn't know. Either way, the only way he'd find out was from the man himself. Issei witnessed the rays of the moon glitter against the tranquil ocean. It was a good night to fish, to cast his line against the waves and forget his failures and fears. Last night, he came to this pier with his other client, the rich foreigner whose name he still didn't know, and got a chance to fish. As a bonus, he got some advice about being patient. Even if things seemed hard, they would eventually work themselves out. He wasn't sure if it even meant anything real, but it did pay off. Sasuke had sent him a message the morning after, meet me at the pier at 8 p.m., with a picture of the pier attached. It had taken him a few days, but Issei finally got his meeting. Now Sasuke stood on the pier's edge, gazing into the endless night. Instead of his regular beige cloak, a black high-collared coat covered his arms, matching his pants. He looked like a shadow who had sprung to life, but there was some color in his face. Last time they'd met, he looked as pale as a sheet. Where did you go? Issei asked. Sasuke had disappeared without notice. He wasn't at his hotel and he didn't answer his calls. It was frustrating, maddening, and it had plagued his weekend, but he had no choice but to wait. Around, he said. I needed a place to train. So that's why you couldn't answer my calls. He inclined his head. It must have inconvenienced you. Issei shrugged. Don't worry, I get it. I've been doing some training myself. That fight had exposed several areas he needed to work on. If he was going to get into another life-threatening battle, he couldn't afford to let his weakness bring anyone else down with him. He made eye contact with Sasuke. You met Kiba, didn't you? No point in beating around the bush. I did. He took one step towards Sasuke. Why? It's none of your concern. Sasuke's single eye drilled into him, but Issei steeled himself. He came to get his answers, and he wasn't going to let fear get in his way. Of course it is. Kiba's my friend, and I help my friends whenever they need it. Sasuke didn't respond. It was the opening he needed to strike. Why would you go out of your way to help a stranger fight an exorcist? Did you get screwed over by the church too? It was the only thing that seemed to make sense. Sasuke had enough money to rent out a hotel room on his own even though he was an orphan. He knew how to fight with a sword, but he barely knew anything about the supernatural world. As far as he could tell, he was human. Maybe he'd been a victim of a cruel experiment, and somehow managed to escape. Maybe that was why his left eye was kept hidden by his hair, or why he only used his right hand for everything. I've never interacted with the church, Sasuke said. Damn, he just destroyed his theory, but Issei still had a feeling he was on the right track, even if he had taken a wrong path. Then why were you so interested in the Excalibur? I destroyed one. Issei blinked, but rather than try to explain himself, Sasuke pulled out a scroll and unfurled it on the pier's wooden surface. A set of black symbols that looked a lot like kanji appeared on the paper before a puff of smoke emerged. When it cleared, Issei saw metal fragments of what must have been a sword on top of the scroll. Was the exorcist you fought named Freed? Yes. Issei whistled. Sasuke had somehow managed to destroy an Excalibur, while his dragon shot only made them crack. It did line up with Kiba's story, though. If anyone finds about this, you're screwed. Sasuke put the Excalibur's remains back in his scroll and closed it with his strange technique, pocketing it. Who else is interested in the Excalibur? Some badass fallen angel named Kokabile. He leads a whole faction of fallen angels. And there are exorcists in this city looking for the other Excalibur fragments. I see. That's all you have to say? Issei asked. Do you know anything else about Kokabile? There wasn't a hint of fear in Sasuke's eye. He had a good poker face, but maybe he didn't care that he could become the target of two powerful factions that could wipe him off the face of the earth. Got nothing, he said, because there wasn't a thing he could say. How did you learn about the exorcists? Issei smirked. I fought them. He felt Sasuke's black eye turn to coal from sheer intensity. How? Issei considered saying that they visited his home and leaving it there, but Sasuke looked like he was about to wring the answers from him by force. So he recounted their harrowing fight and explained Kiba's involvement, to make Sasuke understand. Kiba knows the Excaliburs can be destroyed, and every time he fights, he's willing to kill. He doesn't care if he gets hurt, all he wants is his revenge. Kiba left you behind. That wasn't the response he was expecting. But he was right. To no one's surprise, Kiba hadn't come to school. He made his choice. There was no use in dwelling on it. How'd you guess? You remember that talk we had about stray devils? Issei nodded, and his eyes widened as he figured out what Sasuke was getting at. He won't do it. He's not that crazy. Sasuke began to approach him. Both of his hands were covered by his coat. Did Kiba ask for your help, or did he go out on his own? He didn't want anyone's help. He continued to close the gap between them, looming larger with every step. And he was angry that he lost his chance to kill one of his enemies, even though he almost died. Issei grimaced. Yeah. They were next to each other. Sasuke looked down on him with both of his eyes. Let me take care of Kiba. Issei flinched, processing the left eye that Sasuke had chosen to reveal. It was gray, two perfect circles etched within them. There was sort of an ethereal, otherworldly presence to it. He was taller than him, he knew that, but he never looked so imposing as he did in that moment. What do you mean, take care of him? Exactly what I said. Once again, Sasuke was being vague. It was how he was in general, and he let it go because he didn't want to lose his first true contract. But this wasn't about his progression as a devil, this was about Kiba, and he had to know the truth. Sasuke was so fixated on the idea of revenge that he chased after Kiba and helped him beat Freed. If that wasn't enough, he destroyed an Excalibur and didn't seem to care that he could attract the wrong kind of attention from some hardcore badasses. And if he wasn't lying, he had nothing to do with the church or anyone affiliated with it. What was going on? Why do you care about Kiba at all? He'll destroy himself in order to get his revenge. I won't let that happen to someone else. It was a shock to his ears that Sasuke could express his own fears so succinctly, so honestly. Still, Sasuke didn't know Kiba like Rias did, and Rias was the one who told him to leave Kiba alone. He won't listen to me or my master or the rest of us. What makes you think he'll listen to you? With how close they were, he couldn't avoid staring at Sasuke's face, but he couldn't find any fault, any opening. I'll make him understand. He said it with such conviction that it nearly convinced Issei that he could actually do it where Kiba's friends, his family, couldn't. Do you need any help? Sasuke frowned. You'll just get in the way. Issei recoiled like he'd been slapped. Sasuke's words were an echo that drove him mad. You want me to sit around and do nothing while you go and save Kiba? That's exactly what you're going to do. Issei pushed Sasuke, but he didn't budge and his palms tingled from the contact. It was like slamming against a brick wall. He grabbed Sasuke's coat collar instead. You bastard! Who the hell do you think you are? Sasuke glared at him, but he was hyped up on anger and loads of other negative emotion. He wasn't going to be intimidated by some pretty boy asshole. Kiba's my friend, damn it, and you can't stop me from trying to help him. Did you promise someone you'd help Kiba? Issei's eyes quivered and he shivered, for a moment. He tightened his grip on Sasuke's collar. No, I didn't promise anyone anything. Can't I do something because it's the right thing to do? Sasuke smirked, and it was infuriating that he wasn't scared or even concerned. That's not what you're doing. He wanted to help Kiba, he really did, but he'd been a shitty friend and teammate just because he was jealous of Kiba's looks and popularity. If he knew about the pain he was holding in his heart, he'd try to be better, but chances were that he'd be in the exact same position he was in right now. The problem was that Sasuke was right, and he hated it. How was he able to see right through him? Issei let go of Sasuke's coat, dropping his head in embarrassment. Damn it. Sasuke put his hand on Issei's shoulder. His gaze was surprisingly gentle, filled with understanding. You've done your best, Issei. But it'll be harder for Kiba if you're there to remind him of what he's lost. Give him time to realize that on his own. He sighed. I don't want him to die. He won't. I promise. He patted his shoulder once, then walked into the night, and returned to the shadows. Sasuke had been a man of mystery, but Issei thought he had an idea of what made him tick. He was wrong, he didn't know a thing at all. The only thing he knew for sure was that Sasuke would help Kiba with every fiber of his being. If only he could put everything on the line to help out his friend. He did it before, using the balance breaker to save Rias from a doomed marriage. When it came down to it, sacrifice was something he could embrace with ease. It won't surprise me if your passion ends up killing you one day. Issei held up his left hand. It was glowing bright green. Drake? Drake was the dragon sealed within the boosted gear, the main source of his incredible powers. Drake was why Issei was called the Red Dragon Emperor. He left him alone most of the time, only speaking to him when he had something important to say. Recently, he'd warned him about the oncoming arrival of his counterpart, the White Dragon Emperor. For him to speak now, after his confrontation with Sasuke. Is Sasuke the guy you warned me about? No. You would know if he arrived. They had a mental link, but Drake could also speak through his gauntlet, which he was currently doing. I assumed this Sasuke was only a man with an unusual source of power, but for him to have destroyed an Excalibur. Issei frowned. What are you saying? Be careful. Sasuke is a man with no attachment to this world. And a man with nothing to bind him is a man that has nothing to fear. There was a hostess club downtown that struggled to make ends meet. Its problems were many: few hostesses, lack of pleasing atmosphere and decor, mediocre service, and limited choice in alcohol. The old manager had been replaced, and in only a couple of months, its fortunes had completely reversed. Rumor was that the new manager had nearly 20 years' experience running hostess clubs from Tokyo to Osaka, and to those that knew him, he hadn't aged a day. Some thought it was good genes, others thought he had access to Japan's best plastic surgeon. Kiba thought differently. The new manager might have been a fallen angel. That was why he was standing in front of the club's entrance in the dead of night, squinting at the sign that read forbidden fruit in blinding neon gold. The host's smile was equally shiny, filled with flawless white teeth. His black hair was perfectly coiffed, and there wasn't a single wrinkle on his face or his black tuxedo. Welcome to the forbidden fruit, the host said in flawless Japanese. How may I assist you, my dear young man? One of his powers as a devil was the ability to understand every language he heard, and communicate to the listener in their native tongue. Naturally, Kiba was fluent in Japanese, having lived in Japan since he'd been reborn, and that let him know if he was dealing with a foreigner. It wasn't doing that here. He couldn't hear the faint hint of static. "I'm looking for the manager," Kiba replied. "I want to work here." He found a clean red dress shirt that went well with a black suit jacket and his school trousers. With a bit of transformation magic, he looked just old enough to be in this kind of area without adult supervision, and different enough to avoid being recognized. The host raised a perfectly curled eyebrow. "Do you have a CV and proper identification?" Kiba looked into the host's black eyes. A flash went off, like he was taking a picture. "If you let me in, I can procure them for you." The host let out a brief laugh. "Of course. Please come in." His sharp eyes had dulled, just enough that it wouldn't arouse suspicion. Compared to Rias, he was a rank amateur at memory manipulation, but it was a discipline Rias drilled into him to ensure their lives as devils in a masquerade remained hassle-free. They weren't supposed to use it unprovoked, but desperate times called for desperate measures. At any rate, the inside of the club was packed to the brim with hostesses entertaining their guests. Alcohol flowed freely, and as Kiba's eyes adjusted, he took in the purple decor that dominated the club's aesthetic, offset only by the gentle golden light emanating from the sole chandelier. The host led him to the manager's office, ordering a coworker to take his place at the entrance, and took a seat behind the desk. He should have seen this coming, but this made things easier. "Why are you interested in working at a hostess club?" the manager asked, in a rougher voice than the smooth, dulcet tones he used as a host. "You're better off applying at a host club." "I actually wanted to get some information. Do you have a benefactor of some kind?" "No. Don't need one." Kiba's eyes narrowed. "Why come here, then?" It was a good opportunity for business. This place is in between Tokyo and Kyoto, and compared to Osaka, the market is mostly untapped. The dull, milky glaze in his eyes was sharpening. He wouldn't be so willing to talk once the spell ran its course. "And nobody's offered to help you get settled in?" "I don't work well with partners." Besides, his black eyes turned razor sharp. "I know who really runs the show in this town, and I know not to shake the hornet's nest. Do you?" Kiba allowed a smile to grace his lips. "No. But I can handle myself." The manager chuckled. "You've got guts, kid, I can say that much." He stood up and handed Kiba a business card, egg white base, bold black lettering, evenly centered. The man took his business seriously. "Call me when you want a job, and I can get you a chance to make it in this business. It's on you if you want to take it." He pocketed the card and gave the manager a bow, keeping his smile plastered on. "Thank you." The hostess club was well run. He had experience in talking to clients of all kinds, and he had the looks to entrance any woman who came his way. It would make for some decent eye candy if he could get work at a host club, and he did enjoy meeting new people and finding some interest in their lives. But he didn't visit Forbidden Fruit to get a job or talk to a pretty hostess, and once he reached the closest uninhabited alley, Kiba let out a shaky breath. He had searched, and searched, and searched for any type of hint that would lead him to the Grigori, visiting abandoned churches and rundown apartment buildings, dens of debauchery and temptation. The hostess club should have been a legitimate lead. Hostess clubs, and host clubs for that matter, were good places to enthrall unsuspecting guests into joining a fallen angel's secret cult. The biblical imagery the club's name evoked was incredibly blatant. Too blatant, it seemed. In the end, the Forbidden Fruit was only a red herring, like everything else. Kiba checked the time on his phone. 11:34 p.m. Sleep would help keep his mind clear. When his revenge was at stake, he couldn't afford to function at anything less than 100%. There were 7 fragments of the original Excalibur scattered across the world. 1 was currently unaccounted for. 1 was destroyed. 2 belonged to exorcists he couldn't currently find. 3 were in the possession of fallen angels. 1 week of searching and 2 life-threatening fights later, he was no closer to finding any of them. Other than killing Freed, he hadn't accomplished anything worth talking about. Sasuke was the only reason why an Excalibur had even been destroyed. Zenobia was still alive, and the exorcist Excaliburs were only damaged. How infuriating. It wouldn't stop him. He knew what needed to be done, and he wasted too much time pretending that he could live an ordinary, pleasant life. That was why he was eating lunch at a cafe, because he needed energy and didn't feel like cooking. The search was a lonesome, exhausting journey, but he could handle it. He had to. When he finished his lunch, Kiba paid his fee and left. He wasn't dressed in the makeshift suit he wore last night. He was wearing a dark gray short-sleeved shirt and jeans. It made him inconspicuous, as it turned out that wearing a school uniform when school was still going garnered unwanted attention. He'd scoured a decent chunk of the city, and there were many more places to investigate. He hoped to find a stray exorcist, or better yet, a fallen angel who could lead him to Kokabille. If Fried were still alive, he'd be useful. Unfortunately, Fried scorned him even in death, so he'd have to find another way. It took him another hour of walking and fruitless searching before he found himself near a bathhouse. The road around him was empty, and peeking inside showed that it was practically barren. He wasn't sure what this bathhouse's peak hours were, and he hadn't taken a shower in a week. It was a good thing he didn't have much body odor. So he walked in, paid the admission fee and scrubbed himself from head to toe with soap, dousing his body in cold water. Other than the scar on his right bicep, he was free of any blemishes. Kiba took a dip in the bath, soaking himself in the hot water. When he came out, he felt refreshed, ready to get back to work. More time had elapsed than he thought, but the chance to relax and the silence that came with it helped him come up with new ways to tackle this problem. He'd been thinking too narrowly. He wouldn't stumble across a fallen angel, he wasn't that lucky. Maybe a client had interacted with a fallen angel in the past, and they could point him in the right direction. Plan made, Kiba left the tiny street leading into the bathhouse and crossed paths with a girl from his school. She had long black hair, a slender figure, firm brown eyes covered by square glasses. "Tsubaki, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same question, Kiba. What are you doing at a bathhouse outside of school?" "School ended 35 minutes ago. Why did you choose to come to a bathhouse?" She frowned, eyebrows furrowing. "If I answer your question, will you cooperate?" While he didn't intend to answer her questions with more questions, he didn't want to entertain her either. Still, the faster he was done, the sooner he could get back to his mission. "Sure. To answer your question, my heater broke. I plan to take a bath before returning to school. Us meeting here is merely coincidence." He would have bought the excuse if it was coming from a regular schoolgirl, but Tsubaki Shinra wasn't a regular schoolgirl. She was vice president of Ko Academy's student council, and a devil just like him. "I have no reason to lie to you." Kiba frowned. "In that case, I won't stop you. The bathhouse is empty. I'll see you around." He stepped past her, but she hadn't moved an inch. "Will you? You haven't been in school for a week." Being a high school devil wasn't who he was, and it wasn't who he could be until his death, as Isaiah was avenged. Besides, there wasn't any point in attending school if he only did it to humor Rias. He might have liked learning new things, but he could always hire a good teacher. "Truancy will reflect badly on your reputation," she said, complete with a disapproving stare. "It will also be difficult to catch up on the work you've missed, which will make tests harder, lowering your chances of being accepted into a good university." Kiba scoffed. "You've put a lot of thought into something that isn't your problem." Tsubaki's eyes shot wide, and Kiba immediately winced. "I'm sorry. That was uncalled for." Tsubaki nodded, eyes returning to their regular size. "It may not be my problem, but it is yours. Are you going through personal troubles? Are you sick?" She had stood perfectly straight the whole time, and save for her shifting facial expressions, she was the picture of decorum. It made the concern she was displaying all the more moving. Tsubaki might have known someone who had come across a fallen angel. No, that didn't make sense. She would have told her master and eliminated the fallen angel immediately. Also, if she helped him, it would inevitably drag her entire peerage into his quest for vengeance. Not that he really cared about them, but it would only create more problems than it would solve. "Something came up," Kiba said instead. "I can't go to school until it gets resolved. It's too hard to focus." "I see. I can get you the work you've missed, and ensure that your absence doesn't reflect on your record." This time, it was Kiba's eyes who bulged out. "Why would you do all that? Is it because of our peerages?" "No." The faintest hint of pink tinged her cheeks. "I want to help you." Kiba smiled, and it wasn't something he plastered on. "Thank you." Tsubaki returned his smile with one that curved her lips upward. "You're welcome. I still think you should come to school. You'd attract less attention if you did." "I'll think about it," he said to appease her. Although, he was trying to be inconspicuous, so maybe she was onto something. He rolled his shoulders. No one had interrupted them during their conversation or overheard them, so it was safe to leave. "Be careful," Tsubaki said. "There are exorcists in the city, and while they promised they would keep the peace, you shouldn't be caught alone with them." His eyes turned cold. "I know." There was an abandoned junkyard on the outskirts of the city, filled with plenty of targets perfect for slashing and stabbing and enough clear space for him to improve his speed. Coming here was a choice, a commitment to training himself until he couldn't stand. That fight with the exorcist was a crushing reminder of his weakness. Tsubaki had done him a real favor out of the goodness of her heart, and not having to worry about school let him really focus on his mission without that albatross hanging over his neck. He wondered if she'd be so considerate if he told her he wanted to wage war on the Grigori. Merely thinking about them made his blood boil. Kiba despised the fallen angels. They were arrogant, capricious, obsessed with power, and lacked a single shred of empathy. It wasn't just prejudice that forged his opinion. He knew people, knew friends, who'd been harmed and even killed by fallen angels. In that regard, it was serendipity that Kokubile had stolen the Excaliburs. However, he wasn't foolish enough to believe that he could defeat him on his own. If Zenobia could bring him to the brink of death with one slash, a veteran of the Great War would obliterate him. He didn't think he'd get out of a fight with his battalion of fallen angels unscathed, either, but he could pick and choose his battles. He thought about contacting his old Kenjutsu teacher, Tsuji Okita, as his expertise and experience would be a great boon. However, doing that required a trip to the underworld, and his teacher was Surzek's knight. If Surzek found out about his plan, he'd ask questions Kiba wasn't willing to answer. There was a tenuous balance between the three great biblical factions, and there was no way that he'd be the one who set off another great war. If it meant obtaining his revenge, though he'd already made sacrifices. When it came down to it, what was one more? For the rest of the day, Kiba cut through metal and strained his limbs, pushing himself beyond his limits to reach the peak of his strength. He couldn't afford to fail. A chill rattled his bones, heralding the oncoming night. He took in a deep breath, rust and iron and sweat assaulting his senses. Then he slashed through the metal of a sedan roof, slicing it almost all the way through. Not good enough. Twin swords fell from his hands, fading into the void. Kiba's swordplay was good, he was fast and quick on his feet, and he could create many different swords with his sacred gear. But he couldn't create holy swords or replicate legendary weapons, he couldn't create afterimages from sheer speed, and his physical power was mediocre, making heavier swords a bad fit for him. This was the peak of his strength. For now, it would have to do. As luck would have it, he came across a mansion a few minutes away from the far side of the junkyard. An overwrought black gate covered with vines and untrimmed hedges barred it from the outside world. Gray bricks sloughed off the mansion's walls and tiles were missing from its ornate rooftop. In such a state of decay, it would have been natural for the mansion's windows to have been cracked and chipped, but the window frames were clean, clear of jagged glass. When he looked inside, deep blue eyes looked back. They weren't his. Whoever those eyes belonged to might know why the mansion was so dilapidated. He wouldn't have seen this mansion if he teleported home, but he chose to go for a walk, and it brought forth an opportunity that he was ready to capitalize on. His body ached from fatigue, but his mind was as sharp as ever. Focused, determined, desperate. It was only a matter of time until he found one of Kokubile's angels. And this strange mansion could be his key to victory. Kiba jumped over the gate and passed through fields of untamed grass. The wooden doors opened with a touch, and the only light inside came from distant moonbeams. Bizarrely enough, the lobby was pristine, with a marble staircase and mahogany floors that were scrubbed clean of imperfection. Was the outside merely a way to dissuade bystanders from entering? It had to be, since there was a young woman standing at the top of the staircase. Her hair was long and black, streaked with yellow and pink, and her eyes were a deep blue. "Good evening," she said in a soft, sugary sweet voice. "Are you lost?" Kiba smiled. "My apologies. I thought this mansion was abandoned." "If you'd merely knocked, I would have let you in." The lady of the house strolled down the stairs, black skirt swishing against her ankles. "May I offer you something to eat?" "No, thank you." The lady came to a stop on the bottom stair, an arm's length from touching him. Her head reached his nose. "What brings you to my humble abode?" "Just passing through." She nodded, adjusting the cuff on her white dress shirt. "Do you trespass every mansion you see, or am I a lucky exception?" "Only the abandoned ones." Her nose twitched. "Of course." She raised a small, pale hand to her mouth. "Ah. Where are my manners? You may call me Marietta." Kiba considered giving this Marietta his real name. He couldn't be reckless. Then again, she wouldn't remember him before the evening ended. Common courtesy dictates that you give your name as well. In spite of her name, Marietta's Japanese was almost immaculate. "I'm Yuno." Yuno was a letter away from his real first name, Yuto. He preferred being referred to by his last name, and as such, everyone he knew called him Kiba, even Rias, making his first name largely a formality. "Well met, Yuno. Shall I give you a tour of the house?" Kiba stepped to the side, granting the lady free passage. I'd be honored. Marietta smiled with too many teeth. Do you need any light? It gets fairly dark at night. Please. She took out a lighter and flicked on a flame. Kiba kept his eyes focused on her back as she led him around the mansion. The kitchen was large, the fridge and cabinets packed with food and drinks. The living room had a pair of lush couches and polished tables. There was a study with books stacked in shelves that spread across the room, from floor to ceiling. There were 4 bathrooms and 7 bedrooms. He got to see them all except the master bedroom. You will have to work very hard before I grant you access to my room, Marietta said, stifling a laugh with her dainty hand. The rooms were clean, well-maintained, but empty. Devoid of discarded objects or loose articles of clothing, things that proved that someone lived in this mansion. Perhaps Marietta was a stickler for cleanliness and order. If she was, that didn't explain why all the windows he saw were missing glass. Do you have any family? I do, but they work late and I'm an only child. And you? I moved away recently. They reached the staircase. Marietta swiveled around, peering at him. Whatever for? Kiba smiled, somewhat wan. I wanted to strike out on my own, see what the world has to offer. She giggled quietly, but the sound was surprisingly vulgar. My mother did the same. Do you want to know what she told me? What did she say? A little bit of patience will take you a long way. Patience was a virtue he'd forced himself to learn. It had been hard at times, but the knowledge that there was a chance was enough motivation to stay the course and ride through the rougher tracks. Marietta strolled down the staircase again, and it looked like she was gliding, only keeping a hand on the railing for support. I'd be more than happy if you could stay with us, you know. Kiba shook his head. I already have a place, but thank you for offering. Her eyes twinkled. Of course. In the end, it seemed like this abandoned mansion wasn't so abandoned, after all, even if it was a bust. Although, there were a couple of things that stood out. Do you mind answering a question? She brushed a stray hair away from her eyes. That depends on what you ask. Do you have someone to clean the outside of the mansion? Marietta adjusted her cuffs. I prefer our yard's current arrangement. It keeps strangers from snooping around, and solitude is quite comforting. He couldn't quite agree with that. It got lonely sometimes. And the windows? Why don't they have any glass? Marietta shrugged. The heat can be quite an annoyance to deal with. Leaving the windows open helps lower the ambient temperature. It would have made sense if the windows were actually open, but they weren't there at all. So you keep the glass in storage? Her eyebrows furrowed. Yes. Then we take the panes out for the winter. It was a strange custom, but this was a house that didn't seem to have electricity. No electricity meant no thermostat. It also meant no lights, yet Marietta first reached him without any problems. Kiba stared into her eyes. It was time to get going. I understand. Thank you for your hospitality, Marietta. You're welcome. I bid you farewell, with the hope we'll meet again. He heard a rustling of feathers come from the kitchen. It was quiet enough that he couldn't mention the sound without tipping Marietta off. Someone with steady footfalls was moving in the kitchen, pulling stuff out. You should leave. Please don't wait for me. Marietta walked to the kitchen, completely professional. But she noticed the feathers too. Kiba waited for a few moments before following her. When he reached the kitchen, he saw Marietta standing next to the kitchen island, talking to a man tearing a large chunk out of his sandwich, chewing it with measured bites. He swallowed and set it on the plate, glaring at him with gold eyes. Shit, Marietta said, putting Kiba on edge. Who is this child, Marietta? The man asked. His face was porcelain smooth, but his black hair was short, messy. Marietta frowned. Some guy I met. The man dusted off his hands and discarded his royal blue jacket, leaving him in a maroon long-sleeved shirt and white jeans. For a man who stood so rigidly, his outfit was pretty casual. What did I tell you about inviting strangers? Don't. Precisely, he said, not taking his eyes off Kiba for a second. What's your name, boy? Kiba frowned, keeping his face level. The man had switched from his native tongue to Japanese with ease. You know. You don't look like a you know. He shrugged his shoulders. I get that a lot. What's your name, sir? Call me Sal. Marietta let out an unladylike snort. How did you come across our house? I was passing through. And you entered our home thanks to my daughter. Marietta glanced at him, pupils dilating from what might have been fear. From what little he knew about parents, it seemed like Marietta was rebelling against her father's strict parenting. However, considering that she was a lot more informal around her father, that probably wasn't right. Something was setting him off, and he wasn't sure what. Do you keep any birds? Marietta shook her head. We don't keep them. Sometimes I'll feed a crow that comes by. Kiba felt sweat bead at the back of his neck. That wasn't a crow he heard. Why choose to visit Japan of all places? Sal rolled up his sleeves. I believe it's time for you to leave, you know. Do you know about the Grigori, Sal? Sal's eye twitched. Jackpot. If you know what's good for you, you'll stop talking. No. Marietta, take care of the child. Marietta had frozen, mouth agape, eyes bulging out of their sockets. She swallowed thickly, giving her father a nod, then pushed off the floor, stopping an arm's length away from Kiba. I'm sorry about this, you know, she said in Japanese. But you can't know about us. Marietta's eyes glowed, magic thrumming off her body in waves of blue light that coalesced at her palm. A smirk pulled Kiba's lips taut. Don't be, Marietta. Kiba summoned a short sword and swallowed the light with his holy eraser. He kept her bound with the holy eraser's tendrils and twisted her, holding his sword against her throat. Tell me everything you know about the Grigori. Sal crossed his arms. Let Marietta go and I won't end your miserable existence. I won't, not until you give me what I want. Marietta was dangerously still. Her father breathed through his nostrils, but there wasn't a hint of stress on his face, nor was he about to lash out in anger or panic. You can hear me, can't you, devil child? He said in his native tongue. Kiba frowned. What do you want, fallen angel? Marietta gasped, but Sal stepped around the island. 3 sets of black wings emerged from his back, the most he'd ever seen on a fallen angel. Allow me to grant you a reprieve. So long as you do not harm my daughter, you can return to your peerage with your life intact. I'll simply wipe away your memory of our encounter. His voice had turned an octave colder, and the casual menace he exuded was enough to give Kiba pause. For a moment. Trust me, I'd prefer to leave without a fight, but I can't do that until I get my answers. What purpose would that knowledge grant you? Clarity. Clarity, remove your bindings on my daughter, and I will answer one question. You have my word, for I am Serial, and my word is my covenant. That was the wrong thing to say. No matter what Sal's true name was, he was a fallen angel, and therefore his enemy. Answer my question first, and I'll let her go. You have my word as a devil. Father, please, Marietta said. Just give him something so he can leave. A long-suffering sigh escaped from Serial's lips. Asked your question? Where can I find the remaining Excaliburs? Serial frowned. Possession of that knowledge will not end well for you. Ask another question. Kiba clicked his tongue. This fallen angel was trying to protect him. Unbelievable. What does Kokubyo plan to do with the Excaliburs? He wants to consolidate its power. For what reason, I am not currently aware, though I imagine it would grant him more influence over the Grigori. Why not go for another weapon? He shook his head. Your question was already answered. Now, devil, hold your end of the bargain. Kiba stared at Marietta, then Serial. She was still at his mercy, but she was mostly innocent, and tried to protect him in her own way. You won't have her fight me? That won't be necessary. He released Marietta, letting her rush to her father's side. Thank you. We may have different allegiances, but there is no need for unnecessary bloodshed. Kiba clutched his sword's hilt. You were willing to let Marietta do your dirty work, so don't bother spinning this. That is why I said unnecessary. Serial conjured a long spear made of red light, taking hold of it. It is clear that you are a danger to my brethren, so you must be silenced. Kiba sprinted across the kitchen, willing a katana to form at his right hand. He was down a hostage, but that wasn't so important. It was Serial who had the answers he needed. Once he was within range, he unleashed the holy eraser. However, Serial reacted fast, throwing the spear to keep his tendrils at bay. Marietta, create a barrier around the mansion. Yes, father. Marietta sprouted a pair of charcoal black wings and flew out of the window, though not before glancing at him with sad eyes. Kiba threw his short sword at her direction. Serial deflected it with a wing, batting it against the far wall. Just as planned. He wanted Serial away from the island, so he could either flee through the window or fight him. It also gave him a bit more room to move. Now, it's just you and me. Serial threw a trio of light spears at him. Swords erupted through the wooden floors like spikes, protecting him from harm. Useless, Serial said, eyes distending from fury. You come into my home, damage my property, take my daughter as your hostage, and risk upending the balance between our factions. How arrogant must you be? Kiba raised his katana. Why would a fallen angel care about keeping the peace? What is the point in waging war without good reason? With a wave of his hands, the swords retracted, and Kiba rushed in. A spear of light blocked his strike, but Kiba clipped Serial's wing with a dagger that sparked lightning. Serial grunted, releasing the light spear, and Kiba let go of the katana, setting a knight's sword against his throat. If you don't want to leave Marietta without a father, you'll tell me everything you know. The fallen angel's teeth gnashed against each other. Your persistence is quite vexing. Are you that eager to die? I don't have a choice. As long as one Excalibur exists, I'll always be in danger. Serial frowned. An imperious calm had settled over his visage. How unfortunate. He slammed his palm into Kiba's stomach. Kiba jabbed, but didn't get far as Serial blasted him away with a beam of red light. His head collided against the wall, just barely missing the cabinets, and lunged away from a javelin that cracked the wall, cleaving through the sleeve of his shirt. If he was half a second late, he would have bled. As it was, a thin wound oozed blood from Serial's neck, so Kiba created a wall of swords to create some distance. Serial was starting to grow serious, and one blast had torn right through his shirt, burning his torso. Kiba ran towards the lobby and jumped, hovering parallel to the ceiling with his wings. Serial had broken through his wall and flew into the lobby. Most people didn't look up, and he was banking on Serial taking time to search for him. He exhaled, and Serial looked up. Kiba immediately threw the dagger he'd created, careening towards the second-floor wall and kicking off it, twin swords ready to decapitate him. Serial flapped his wings, creating a gust of wind that arrested his momentum. Kiba braced himself and dove to the staircase, running down the railing at full tilt. He jumped to the other railing, avoiding an orb of light, and lunged. Instead of throwing a light spear or attacking at all, Serial moved out of the way, forcing Kiba to catch himself. When he turned, Serial clipped his leg with a light spear, then flew into his guard and kicked him. Kiba crashed through the decayed brick wall, landing on the gnarled grass of the mansion's front yard. He slowly climbed to his feet, but his right leg buckled under him. His calf was bleeding from a deep wound. Serial was swimming in and out of view as he flew through the mansion's entrance. Everything hurt. He was losing badly, and Serial only had one injured wing and a shallow cut on his neck. What would it take for him to win? Has the barrier been erected? Serial asked. It has, Marietta said. She flew down from the rooftops, landing next to her father. I think he's got the message. Serial frowned. Do you have a soft spot for this devil? Marietta pulled at her cuff. It's not a problem, is it, father? Kiba scowled. He must have hit his head really hard if a fallen angel was pleading for his life. How pathetic. Did you hear that, devil? You might be talented, but you are no match for me. Run, and cling to life, so you may enjoy what it has to offer. The twin swords disappeared. Kiba created a katana that thrummed with lightning, but it wouldn't be enough. Sword Birth let him create swords that were perfectly designed, and imbue those swords with elemental properties. However, once a sword was created, he couldn't alter its design. He couldn't create swords that could cut through anything, or a rapier with the crushing power of a great sword. This was the peak of his strength, and it wasn't enough. If he wasn't desperate, if he wasn't willing to use Serial to get to Kokabeel, if his brain wasn't pounding against his skull, he would have called it a day. Try again after he recovered. But he'd come too far to give up now. Kiba pressed his hand against his heart and called upon the power of his evil peace. It would give him the strength he needed to win, consequences be damned. Before he could undo the restrictions binding his latent power, he heard the chirping of 1,000 birds from high above. Lightning crashed against a bright blue barrier that encompassed the mansion and smothered it entirely. A shadow fell to the mansion, landing between Kiba and the fallen angels. A smoke bomb broke against the cobblestone path, spreading across the yard like wildfire. Kiba felt a firm hand grab him, then the rush of wind surrounded his body as he was taken from the mansion. When the wind stopped, he saw Sasuke looking down on him. Saved once again. An unfamiliar ceiling hung above Kiba, the single light bulb currently deactivated. Clutching his stomach, he felt bandages wrapped around it. There were more bandages wrapped around his calf, and his leg had been raised on a platform of pillows. A dull pain throbbed across his body, but he was alive. Sasuke was seated in a chair across the room, still as a statue. Seeing him here in this unfamiliar room made Kiba grimace. "How are you feeling?" Sasuke asked. A black coat was wrapped around his body. Kiba clambered to a sitting position. "Better. How did you find me?" "I tracked you down." "Why?" "You left your friends behind." Kiba frowned. "When did you find out about that?" "Issei told me what happened to you." Once again, Issei had looked out for him, and once again, Sasuke saved his life. "Where were you the past few days? Why come now?" "I was searching for clues about the Excalibur." He didn't elaborate, but Kiba would make him reveal everything. "Did you know about the mansion?" "Yes. There wasn't much I could find." Of course he couldn't. Why would he? The mansion had been abandoned. "Did your friends accept your departure?" Kiba stared at his hands. Clenched them. "No." Sasuke frowned. This was what got to him. What did you learn from those fallen angels? It wasn't his concern, but he'd gone out of his way to search for clues and saved his life. He let out a frustrated breath. The older fallen angel knows where the remaining Excaliburs are located. He's involved with the Grigori. Who are the Grigori? They're a faction of fallen angels. The ones in this city are led by a fallen angel named Kokobile. I know who he is. Kiba scoffed. If you knew, then why did you ask me about the Grigori? Why did you fight the fallen angel? Why is that important? What did you have to gain from fighting him? Kiba clutched his jeans. Answering a question with another question was really irritating, and Sasuke did it twice. I wanted to get as much information as I could. He would have wiped away my memory if I didn't defend myself. What did that choice cost you? His frown deepened. Nothing. I'll recover from these injuries. And then what? Kiba's jaw clenched. What do you think? Those fallen angels are my only good lead. What about the exorcists you fought with Issei? I can search for them on my own time. That was, of course, if he could find them, but he would. It was only a matter of time. Their Excaliburs were damaged, waiting to be destroyed. They were alone, without support, and Zenobia was still recovering. Searching for them was a luxury he could afford. But he wasn't going to fight them without proper preparation. They were dangerous, and he knew from experience that he couldn't take them lightly. You fought the fallen angel instead of searching for the exorcists. Where did that lead? Why do you care? Sasuke stood up. He walked to the foot of the bed. That fallen angel cleaved a hole through your calf. He left second-degree burns on your stomach and broke your ribs. He gave you a concussion. And if I hadn't arrived when I did, he would have taken your life. So what? I would have run away before he could. The retort came to his lips. But it wasn't the truth. He was prepared to give up his sanity to destroy Serial, and he wouldn't have spared Marietta either. I know. You don't. Kiba grit his teeth. What the hell do you know?